The trade station of Ocular Prime hung in the void like a rusted jewel, spinning slowly against the backdrop of a dying red star. The star, a swollen giant in its final throes of stellar decay, cast a bruised, crimson light over the station's sprawling docking rings. It was a light that made everything look infected, from the sleek hulls of diplomatic cruisers to the scarred flanks of scavenger barges. Inside the station, the air tasted of ozone, recycled sweat, and cheap synthetic spices. It was a sensory assault. Neon signs in a dozen languages flickered and buzzed, selling everything from illegal memory wipes to devotional idols for gods that had been dead for 1,000 years. The corridors were a river of bodies. Reptilian merchants with scales the color of oil slicks pushed past cybernetic monks chanting binary prayers. Smugglers in battered flight jackets traded quiet words with corrupt customs officials in shadowed alcoves. Jace Wren moved through the crowd with the practiced ease of a man who knew exactly how to disappear while standing in plain sight. He was not a large man, but he carried himself with a fluid, dangerous grace, his leather coat worn soft at the elbows and stiff at the collar. He had the kind of face that suggested he had seen the punch coming and decided not to duck. A crooked nose and eyes that were constantly scanning the periphery, sharp and cynical. Today, those eyes were tired. Jace adjusted the strap of the heavy satchel slung across his chest. Inside was a quantum lockbox, a cube of matte black metal that seemed to absorb the garish neon light around it. The job was simple on paper. Deliver the box to a diplomat from the Galactic Council waiting in the VIP sector of the station. The payout was substantial, enough to clear the debt Jace owed to the syndicate on Nar Shaddaa, enough to buy fuel for 3 cycles, enough to keep his ship, the Driftwood, flying for another year. But Jace did not believe in simple jobs. He paused near a holographic propaganda pillar that rose from the deck plating like a jagged tooth. The screen flickered, distorting the image of a severe-looking council general. "Citizens!" the voice boomed, distorted by the station's poor acoustics. "Report any anomalous energy signatures. The threat known as Nyx is considered active in this sector. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage." The image shifted. It showed a grainy, reconstructed video of a fleet burning in orbit around a shattered moon. The destruction was absolute. Then, a still image replaced the carnage. It was a face. A woman's face, pale and terrible, with eyes that seemed to burn through the hologram's resolution. "Nyx," a voice muttered nearby. Jace glanced to his left. A group of mercenaries were huddled around a high table outside a cramped noodle bar, their armor unsealed, drinking mugs of foaming sludge. "I heard she vaporized the entire Third Fleet with a thought," one of the mercs said, slamming his mug down. "Just looked at them, and their fusion cores went critical. She is not a woman. She is a demon from the void." "Garbage," another scoffed, a scarred Rhodian with one cybernetic eye. "She is a council experiment gone wrong, a failed goddess. They made her to end the war, and she decided to end everything else instead. That is why they are terrified. You cannot kill a weapon that thinks it is alive." Jace turned away, shaking his head. He had heard the stories. Everyone had. The ghost of Sector 4, the Annihilator, the woman who eats stars. In a galaxy held together by a brittle peace, everyone needed a monster to fear, and Nyx fit the bill perfectly. To Jace, she was just another reason to keep his head down and his engine running. He did not get paid to hunt monsters. He got paid to move packages. He pushed deeper into the station, moving toward the transit hub that would take him to the upper levels. The crowd thinned slightly here, the noise of the bazaar fading into the hum of ventilation fans and the distant thud of magnetic docking clamps. That was when he saw her. She was standing near a viewport that looked out over the bleeding red curvature of the star. In a station crowded with exotic species and flamboyant fashion, she stood out by being starkly, terrifyingly simple. She wore a long, hooded coat that looked 2 sizes too big, the fabric rough and gray. But the hood had slipped back, revealing hair the color of polished obsidian and skin that seemed to catch the ambient light and hold it. It was not just her appearance, it was her stillness. Jace slowed his pace, instinctively sliding into the shadow of a support strut. He watched her. She looked lost, not the confusion of a tourist who could not find the lift, but the existential dread of someone who had woken up on the wrong side of the universe. Her head snapped left, then right, her movements sharp and bird-like. She was scanning. From her perspective, Jace imagined the world was screaming. He could see it in the way her eyes dilated, taking in the security cameras, the hidden blasters under jackets, the heat signatures of the piping in the walls. She was hyper-alert, dissecting the environment with a precision that made the hair on Jace's arm stand up. She turned slightly, and the dying star outside illuminated the side of her neck. Faint, intricate markings glowed there, pulsing with a soft, rhythmic blue light. They looked like circuitry grown into skin, or perhaps ancient runes burned from the inside out. Jace frowned. He looked at the propaganda screen flickering 50 meters away, then back at the woman. The resemblance was there, buried under the fear and the exhaustion, but the image on the screen was a monster. The woman by the window looked like she was about to shatter. "Target confirmed," a low voice said over a localized comm frequency. Jace's own scanner picked up the burst transmission. He stiffened. He looked across the atrium. 3 men in heavy coats were moving in a pincer formation. They were not station security. They were hunters. High-end, expensive. The kind that did not ask for ID before they started shooting. Their hands were already drifting toward the heavy pistols holstered at their hips. The woman did not see them yet. She was too busy fighting her own senses, overwhelmed by the noise of the station. Jace knew he should walk away. He had the lockbox. He had the payout waiting. He had a rule about not choosing sides, especially when one side was a legendary war criminal and the other was a kill squad. He took a step toward the transit lifts. The woman turned, her eyes locked onto his. Across the crowded, smoky expanse of the deck, she found him instantly, as if he were a beacon in the dark. Her eyes were luminous, swirling with a depth that made Jace feel like he was falling. She did not run from the hunters. She walked toward Jace. She moved with a fluid, predatory grace that contradicted the fear on her face. The crowd seemed to part for her unconsciously, instinct warning them to step aside. She stopped 3 feet from him, up close. The smell of ozone coming off her was intense, like the air after a lightning strike. She looked at him, searching his face, her breathing shallow and fast. "Do you know me?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, raspy, as if she had not used it in days. Beneath the question, Jace heard a terrifying vulnerability. She was not asking for a name. She was asking for an anchor. She was asking if she was real. Jace looked at the hunters closing in. They were 20 meters out, waiting for a clear line of fire. He looked back at her. He saw the glowing markings on her neck, the raw power coiled in her stance, and the absolute terror in her eyes. He realized then that the stories were wrong. She was not a demon. She was a tragedy. A reckless, stupid impulse seized him. It was the same impulse that made him fly through asteroid fields with his shields down, the same impulse that made him take this job in the first place. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a low, intimate rumble that only she could hear. "You are the one every galaxy fears," he said, holding her gaze. And I desire. The words hung between them, heavy and electric. It was a line, a lie, and a truth all at once. He saw the shock register in her eyes. Her pupils blew wide. For a microsecond, the fear vanished, replaced by a sudden, sharp intake of breath. A flush of color rose in her cheeks, confusion, hunger, and a deep, burning shame. She looked at him as if he had just offered her water in a desert, and she was terrified to drink it. She opened her mouth to speak, but the moment shattered. "Contact!" one of the hunters shouted. The air around them warped. A high-pitched whine tore through the atrium as auto turrets dropped from the ceiling, their tracking lasers painting the floor in red grids. The station's PA system blared a deafening alarm. "Security lockdown. Level 4. Remain in place." A massive holographic arrest warrant exploded into existence in the center of the air, projecting her face, Nyx, 10 feet high, rotating slowly. The woman flinched. The vulnerability vanished, replaced instantly by a reflex that looked terrifyingly practiced. She did not crouch. She expanded. The air around her shimmered. Gravity seemed to lurch, the floor plates groaning as an invisible weight slammed down. A wave of force rippled out from her body, knocking a passing cleaning drone out of the air. She was a weapon. She did not want to be, but her body knew no other way. Jace saw the hunters raising their weapons. The kill zone was establishing. "Oh, to hell with it," Jace muttered. He grabbed her wrist. Her skin was burning hot. "Come on!" he shouted over the sirens. She resisted for a fraction of a second, her body rigid. But then she looked at him, the man who had just claimed to desire the monster, and she moved. "Where are we going?" she yelled. "First dates are usually dinner, not mass arrests," Jace cracked, dragging her toward a maintenance hatch marked, "Authorized personnel only." He kicked the panel, the maglock sparking and dying under the heel of his boot. "But I like to keep things interesting." He shoved her through the hatch and scrambled in after her, sealing it just as a plasma bolt scorched the metal where his head had been a second before. They tumbled into a service corridor, a narrow, greased throat of the station filled with pipes and roaring machinery. "Up," Jace commanded, pointing to a vertical shaft. "Gravity is off in the transfer tubes." They sprinted. The sound of cutting lasers hissing against the hatch door behind them spurred them on. They hit the vertical shaft and launched themselves upward. Zero gravity took them. The sudden weightlessness was jarring. Jace kicked off the wall, spinning through the air, grabbing handholds to propel himself deeper into the station's guts. The woman, Nyx, Lyra, whoever she was, moved differently. She did not scramble. She floated with eerie calm. She pushed against the air itself, small ripples of kinetic energy propelling her forward faster than Jace could climb. "They are tracking us," she said. Her voice was flat, detached. She spun in midair, looking down the shaft. 3 hunter drones, sleek black spheres with red eyes, buzzed into the shaft below them. Their weapon ports glowed. "Move!" Jace shouted. The drones opened fire. Searing bolts of red energy streaked past them, boiling the coolant leaking from the pipes. The woman stopped. She did not keep climbing. She turned to face the drones, hovering in the center of the shaft. She raised a hand. "Don't!" Jace yelled, reaching for her. She ignored him. Her fingers splayed. A pulse of violet light erupted from her palm. It was not a beam. It was a distortion. The air in front of her folded. The 3 drones slammed into an invisible wall of force, crumpling like tin cans in a compactor. The explosion was deafening in the confined space, a fireball expanding rapidly, consuming the oxygen. "Go, now!" Jace grabbed her belt and yanked her upward, toward the airlock at the top of the shaft. They burst out onto a catwalk overlooking the industrial furnaces. heat was physical, a solid wall of pressure. Below them, molten metal churned in massive crucibles. A door across the catwalk burst open. The lead hunter, the one with the scar, stepped out. He held a heavy repeater rifle. He didn't hesitate. He opened fire. Jace dove behind a stack of crates, dragging the woman with him. Sparks showered them as the rounds chewed up their cover. "I can stop him," the woman whispered. She was trembling. Her hands were glowing brighter now, the markings on her neck pulsing violently. "I can stop his heart. I can feel it beating. It is so loud." She looked at Jace, her eyes wide with horror. She was terrified of the hunter. Yes, but she was far more terrified of what she was about to do. Jace looked at the hunter advancing on them. Then he looked at her. "No," Jace said firmly. "We are leaving. We are not butchers." "It is what I am," she said, her voice breaking. She started to rise, the energy building around her like a storm. Jace grabbed her shoulders, ignoring the heat radiating from her skin. "Look at me. You do not have to kill everyone. That is their story. Do not make it yours." She froze. The energy wavered. Jace pulled a flash grenade from his belt, primed it, and lobbed it over the crates. Crack. A blinding white light washed out the catwalk. The hunter screamed. "Blinded! Run!" Jace hauled her up. They sprinted past the stumbling hunter, Jace shoving him hard into the railing as they passed, knocking the rifle from his hands. They crashed through the far door, sprinted down a final corridor, and burst into Hangar Bay 9. His ship sat there, an unsightly, asymmetrical hunk of metal that looked like two different ships welded together by a drunk engineer. The driftwood. It was ugly, scarred, and the fastest thing in the sector. "That is your ship?" the woman asked, breathless. "She has a great personality," Jace gasped, hitting the remote release on his wrist comp. The boarding ramp hissed down. They scrambled up the ramp just as the heavy blast doors of the hangar began to slide shut, security trying to seal them in. Laser fire erupted from the upper gantries, pinging off the ship's hull. "Strap in," Jace yelled, throwing himself into the pilot's seat. He didn't bother with the pre-flight check. He slammed the throttle forward and engaged the emergency docking override. The clamps holding the ship blew off with explosive bolts, an aftermarket modification he had paid too much for and was now very grateful to have. The driftwood roared. The engines flared blue-white, incinerating a stack of fuel drums behind them. The ship lurched forward, scraping the closing blast doors with a screech of tearing metal, and shot out into the vacuum of space. "Shields up! Dampeners to maximum!" Jace's hands flew across the console. Outside the viewport, the red star dominated the view. Interceptor fighters were already launching from the station, swarming like angry wasps. "They are locking missiles," the woman said from the co-pilot seat. She was staring at the tactical display, reading the data streams faster than Jace could. "Hold on." Jace grit his teeth. "Calculating jump coordinates." "They will hit us in 4 seconds," she said calmly. "I need 5. "We do not have 5. She reached out. She did not touch the controls. She placed her hand on the dashboard. Jace felt a weird vibration run through the deck plates, a hum that was not mechanical. The ship shuddered. The missiles fired from the interceptors curved. They did not miss. They simply bent away, their guidance systems overwhelmed by a sudden, impossible gravitational anomaly generated from within the cockpit. "Jump!" she commanded. Jace punched the drive. The stars stretched. The red giant smeared into a line of bloody light, and then they were gone, swallowed by the swirling, silent tunnel of faster-than-light travel. Silence crashed into the cockpit. The roar of the engines settled into a steady, rhythmic thrum. The blue glow of hyperspace washed over the interior, painting everything in cool, underwater tones. Jace let out a long breath and slumped back in his chair. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He turned his head to look at her. She was curled in the co-pilot seat, knees pulled to her chest. The glow on her neck had faded to a dull pulse. She looked smaller now, the terrifying power she had displayed back at the station tucked away beneath the surface. "You owe me a drink," Jace said, his voice hoarse. "And an explanation, and probably a new paint job for my hull." She turned to him. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a raw, jagged exhaustion. "Lyra," she said softly. Jace raised an eyebrow. "Is that your name?" "I think so," she whispered. She rubbed her temples. "It is the only sound in my head that does not scream. The rest, it is just flashes, war, burning fleets, a voice telling me to burn." She looked up at him, her eyes searching his face again. "Why did you help me? You saw the warrant, and you know what they say I am." "I have a problem with authority." Jace deflected, unbuckling his harness. He stood up, his knees popping. "And I have a problem with people being hunted like animals." He walked over to the heavy satchel he had thrown into the corner during the takeoff. The job, the diplomat, the payout. It was all gone now. He was running from the council with the most wanted fugitive in the galaxy. He might as well see what he had lost. "I was supposed to deliver this," Jace said, kicking the bag. "To a council diplomat, sealed instructions, quantum lock, worth 50,000 credits. Lyra stared at the black cube peeking out of the bag. A strange expression crossed her face, recognition mixed with dread. "Open it," she said. "I can't. It's biometrically locked to the recipient, and if I try to force it, the data wipes." "Open it," she repeated. She stood up, her legs shaky, and walked over to the bag. She reached out. She did not hesitate. She placed her hand on the scanner pad of the lockbox. Jace opened his mouth to tell her it wouldn't work, that it was keyed to a diplomat named Vexler, that the encryption was military grade. The box chirped. A green light flashed. The heavy click of the locking mechanism echoed in the quiet cockpit. The lid hissed open. Jace stared. The blood drained from his face. "It opened for you," he said. The implications slammed into him like a physical blow. The diplomat. There was no diplomat. The job wasn't to deliver the box to someone. It was to bring the box to you. Or bring you to the box. He looked at her. Lyra was staring into the open container. Inside, glowing data chips sat nestled in foam, alongside a strange crystalline drive that pulsed with the same rhythm as the markings on her neck. "They knew," Lyra whispered. "Someone knew I would be there. Someone knew you would be there." "We were set up," Jace said, the realization turning his stomach. This wasn't a chance meeting. It was a play. A shrill chime from the communications console cut through the tension. A priority alert. Jace walked back to the pilot station and tapped the screen. A galactic bounty notice filled the display. It was a red-level warrant, the kind usually reserved for pirate lords and terrorists. There were two faces on the screen. One was Lyra's. The caption read, "Nix, extreme danger, terminate on sight." The other face was Jace's. Jace Wren, accomplice to genocide, wanted dead or alive. Jace stared at his own face. The wry humor, the charm, the armor he wore to keep the world at a distance. It was all useless now. He was not just a smuggler anymore. He was an enemy of the state. He reached out and opened the blast shield covering the main viewport. The blue tunnel of hyperspace had stabilized, but beyond it, the cold, endless star field waited. It looked vast and indifferent. Lyra stepped up beside him. She did not touch him, but he could feel the heat radiating from her, a living warmth in the cold light of the console. She looked at the bounty, then at the stars, then at him. "You are afraid," she said. It wasn't an accusation. "Terrified," Jace admitted. He looked at her, really looked at her, seeing the person beneath the myth, the woman who had asked if he knew her. "But I meant what I said back there." Lyra looked away, a flush rising on her neck again. She looked at the reflection of herself in the dark glass, a weapon, a fugitive, a mystery. "We are running," she said. "Yeah," Jace said, turning back to the controls to plot a course into the deep dark, away from the trade lanes, away from the life he used to know. "We are running, but at least we are driving." He pushed the throttle forward. The driftwood surged deeper into the void, carrying the two most dangerous people in the galaxy toward a future that was already hunting them down. The freighter. The driftwood hung in the velvet silence of deep space, drifting on minimum power to mask its heat signature. Inside, the silence was anything but peaceful. It was a heavy, suffocating thing, broken only by the hum of the air recyclers and the soft, insistent ping of the news feeds scrolling across the main console. Jace Wren sat in the pilot's chair, staring at the screens. The blue light washed over his face, highlighting the exhaustion etched into the lines around his eyes. The bounty on his head had doubled in the last 6 hours. He was now worth more dead than the entire ship was worth alive. Lyra stood behind him, her arms crossed tight against her chest as if she were trying to hold herself together. Her eyes were fixed on a different screen. It was playing a loop of archival footage, a planet's surface turning to glass under a bombardment of white-hot energy. Great cities dissolving into ash in seconds. Superimposed over the destruction was her face, Nyx, the Annihilator. "It looks real," she whispered. Her voice was brittle. "The way the light bends, the way the atmosphere ignites. I know that physics." Jace spun his chair around. "Propaganda is supposed to look real. Lyra, that is the point. The Council has had 50 years to perfect their special effects." "But I remember the heat," she said, her gaze not leaving the screen. "I remember the sound of the air screaming. I do not remember why." Jace rubbed the back of his neck. The tension in the cockpit was thick enough to chew on. They had been drifting for hours, circling the same questions. Who was she? Why did the lockbox open for her, and who had set them up? "We need to look at the box," Jace said, nodding toward the matte black cube sitting on the navigation table. "The answers are in there." Lyra flinched. She looked at the box with a mixture of revulsion and terror. "I do not want to know." "We cannot run from a ghost story if we do not know the ending," Jace said gently. "You opened it. It is yours." She hesitated, her fingers tracing the glowing markings on her neck. Jace saw the fear in her, not just of the Council, but of herself. She was afraid that if she looked too closely, she would find the monster everyone said she was. "Okay," she breathed. They moved to the table together. The box sat open, its contents bathed in the dim emergency lighting. Jace reached in and pulled out a data pad. It was old, military grade, heavy in his hand. He jacked it into the ship's computer. Data streamed across the central monitor. It was a chaotic mess of encrypted coordinates, flight telemetry from battles that had officially never happened, and fragments of code that looked more like biological sequences than software. "What is this?" Jace muttered, scrolling through the text. Then he stopped. A file header flashed in red. Project Pantheon, classified, level 0. Below it was a sub-file, Asset Nyx, status, deployed. Asset, Lyra read the word aloud. It tasted like poison in her mouth. Not person, asset. Jace clicked the file. It was corrupted, heavy with black bars of redaction, but a fragment of an audio log played. The voice was distorted, synthesized and cold. Asset stability at 40%. Neural override initiated. Target the Endara system. Direct the conduit. Fire. The word fire triggered something in the air of the cockpit. The temperature spiked. Lyra gasped, clutching her head. Flashback. She was not on the ship. She was floating in the vacuum above a green and blue world. The stars were screaming. No, not the stars. The ships around her were screaming, their hulls buckling under immense pressure. Her hands were raised, but they did not feel like her hands. They felt like gates holding back a star. Fire, the voice in her head commanded. It was not a request. It was a code, rewriting her synapses. Please, no. Her own thoughts whimpered, tiny and crushed beneath the weight of the command. Fire. She felt the energy surge through her, a white-hot river of agony and ecstasy. She pushed it out. The world below turned white. The screaming stopped. Lyra! Jace's voice snapped her back. She was on her knees on the deck plating, gasping for air. The lights in the cockpit were flickering wildly. Sparks showered from a blown fuse panel. Jace was kneeling beside her, his hands hovering near her shoulders but not touching, as if he were afraid she might burn him. I did it, she choked out, tears streaming down her face. They were hot, steaming as they hit the cold metal floor. I heard the order. I felt them die. You heard an order, Jace said firmly. That means someone gave it. That log said neural override. That means you did not pull the trigger. You were the gun. Does it matter to the dead? She asked, looking up at him with haunted eyes. It matters to me, Jace said. He stood up and offered her a hand. We need to decode the rest of this. This is just a fragment. We need the full log to prove who was holding the leash. The encryption is council grade, Lyra said, wiping her face. Your ship's computer cannot break it. No, Jace agreed, a reckless grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. But I know a guy. We need to go to the junkyard moon of Ovaris. That is a lawless zone, Lyra said. Slavers, scrappers, and the best data hackers in the sector, Jace countered. If anyone can crack the Pantheon protocol, it is the archivists on Ovaris. He pulled her to her feet. For a second she swayed, and he caught her, his hand steady on her waist. The contact was brief, but it sent a jolt through both of them. Let's go find out who made you a monster, Jace said softly. The journey to Ovaris took 3 days of subspace hopping. They stayed off the main trade routes, weaving through nebulae that looked like bruised skin and asteroid fields that cluttered the sensors with ghost echoes. The confined space of the freighter forced a strange domesticity on them. They were two fugitives sharing a tin can, eating rehydrated protein packs and sleeping in shifts. They played cards to pass the time. Jace taught her Smuggler's Hold, a bluffing game that relied on reading micro-expressions. Lyra was terrible at it. Her face was too honest. You are twitching, Jace pointed out, tossing a credit chip into the pot. You have a bad hand. I am not twitching, Lyra insisted, staring intently at her cards. I am adjusting my thermal regulation. Right. Fold. I hate this game, she grumbled, throwing down a pair of 2s. I'll teach you the E3 version, she said later. It involves telepathic projection of colors. That sounds like cheating, Jace laughed. It is only cheating if you cannot do it. She smirked. It was the first time he had seen her smile for real. It transformed her face, making her look younger, less like a weapon of mass destruction and more like a woman who just wanted to win a card game. On the second day, The gravity generator decided to throw a tantrum. It was an old unit, prone to hiccups. One moment, Jace was repairing a conduit in the ceiling. The next, the artificial gravity cut out completely. "Whoa!" Jace yelped as he drifted away from the ladder, his wrench spinning off into the air. Lyra, who had been napping in the pilot's chair, woke up floating 2 feet above the seat. "What is happening?" "Grav gen glitch," Jace shouted, pushing off a bulkhead to grab his floating toolbox. "Don't panic." He miscalculated his trajectory and slammed into Lyra. They tumbled through the air in a tangle of limbs, spinning slowly in the center of the cockpit. "I am not panicking," Lyra said, her voice surprisingly calm. "But you are elbowing my ribs." They hit the far wall and rebounded, finally coming to a stop near the ceiling. Jace found himself pinned against the viewport, with Lyra pressed flush against him to steady herself. Suddenly, the laughter died. They were chest to chest. Her legs were wrapped instinctively around one of his to anchor them. Her face was inches from his. In zero gravity, everything was heightened. Jace could feel the rapid thrum of her heart against his own chest. He could smell her scent, something like ozone and crushed wildflowers, electric and wild. Lyra's alien senses went into overdrive. She could hear the blood rushing in his veins. She could see the dilation of his pupils, the slight sheen of sweat on his upper lip. Her body responded with a terrifying immediacy. Heat flared in her core, not the cold burn of her combat energy, but something heavier, stickier. It was a hunger she associated with power, with the urge to consume, but this time it was directed at him. "Jace," she breathed. Her voice was a vibration against his collarbone. Jace stared at her. He wanted to kiss her. The urge was so strong it was almost painful. He wanted to wrap his hands in that dark hair and pull her closer. Gravity be damned. But he saw the flicker of panic in her eyes, the way her muscles were tensing, ready to fight or flee. She was a nuclear reactor with a cracked containment shielding. One wrong move, and she could detonate. "Well," Jace choked out, his voice tight. "This is cozy." He gently untangled his leg and pushed off the wall, drifting back toward the gravity controls. "Let me just reset the breaker before we start walking on the ceiling." Lyra watched him go, her body still humming with unspent energy. She wrapped her arms around herself, floating alone in the middle of the room, terrified by how much she had wanted him to stay. Ovaris was a graveyard of ships. The moon had no atmosphere to speak of, just a thin, artificial envelope held in place by ancient shield generators. The surface was a rusted ocean of hull plates, engine nacelles, and spine-like docking towers rising from the junk heaps. They landed in a crater that served as a bazaar. It was a chaotic, desperate place. Scavengers in pressure suits picked through mountains of tech, while black market cyber docs performed surgery in tents made of solar sails. "Keep your hood up," Jace warned as they walked down the ramp. "And do not look anyone in the eye. Eye contact here is either a proposal or a threat." Lyra pulled her cowl low. The noise of the market was a physical assault on her senses. The screech of grinding metal, the shout of hagglers, the electromagnetic buzz of 1,000 active power cells. They navigated through the maze of scrap until they reached a structure made from the hollowed-out skull of a massive spacefaring leviathan. A neon sign above the eye socket read, "Moro's Data Salvage." Inside, the air was cool and smelled of incense and burning circuits. Moro sat behind a console that looked like it had been grown rather than built. He was a gran, three-eyed and goat-faced, with fingers that moved across holographic keys with blurring speed. "We are closed," Moro said without looking up. "Unless you have pre-collapse tech or very good whiskey. I have something better." Jace said, leaning on the console. I have a puzzle even you cannot solve. Morrow looked up. His 3 eyes blinked out of sync. Jace Wren, I heard you were dead, or rich. Usually the two go together. Working on both, Jace said. He placed the lockbox on the counter. I need you to crack the encryption on the drive inside this. Morrow sniffed. He reached out a long finger and tapped the box. Council diplomatic seal. Boring. Wait. He paused. His middle eye widened. This energy signature, it is residue from... He looked at the hooded figure standing silently behind Jace. Nix, Morrow whispered. Before Jace could move, Morrow's hand slammed down on a silent alarm. Blast shields dropped over the windows. A heavy turret unfolded from the ceiling, leveling at Lyra. Do not move, Morrow barked, pulling a heavy blaster from under the counter. The bounty on her is enough to buy this entire moon. Lyra tensed, the air around her beginning to warp. Morrow, wait. Jace stepped in front of the turret. You sell her out, and the council will just glass this moon to make sure there are no witnesses. You know how they work. Morrow hesitated. 50 million credits. Jace, I can retire to a water world. Or, Jace said, his voice dropping to a negotiator's smooth pitch. You can be the only broker in the galaxy to crack the Pantheon Protocol. Think about the reputation, the leverage. You could blackmail half the Senate with what is on this drive. Morrow's eyes narrowed. Greed warred with fear. Leverage was the only currency more valuable than credits on Ovaris. And, Jace added, I will give you the war codes in the lockbox. Old Dominion launch keys, still active. Morrow lowered the blaster slightly. Launch keys? Top shelf, nuclear viable. Morrow grunted. He slapped a button, and the turret retracted. Fine. But if she melts my brain, I am billing you. He plugged the drive into his console. This will take an hour. Do not touch anything. Jace exhaled, wiping sweat from his forehead. He turned to Lyra. She was glaring at him. Launch keys, she hissed. You gave him weapons to buy my safety? He is a data broker. Lyra. He sells codes, he doesn't use them. It was a trade. You traded death for death, she said, her voice rising. Is that all I am to you, a transaction, a ticket to fame? Do not do that, Jace snapped, his own temper fraying. I just saved your life. Again. Maybe I do not want to be saved if it means arming criminals. I could have turned you in, Jace shouted, the stress of the last few days finally cracking his composure. I could have dropped you at the first outpost and collected the reward. I could be sitting on a beach right now instead of standing in a junk heap with a target on my back. But I didn't. Why? Lyra challenged, stepping closer. Why didn't you? Because I am an idiot, Jace yelled. Because I looked at you and I didn't see a monster. I saw someone who was scared and alone, and I... He stopped, breathing hard. And you what? Lyra whispered. And I care, Jace said, the words falling into the silence like stones. I care what happens to you, and that terrifies me more than the bounty. Lyra stared at him, the anger drained out of her, replaced by that same raw panic he had seen in the zero-G tumble. Jace, she started. Done, Morrow announced. They both jumped. It is decoded, Morrow said, looking at his screens with all 3 eyes wide. By the stars. Jace, you were right. This is not just a log, it is a blueprint. They crowded around the screen. The text scrolled by. Project Pantheon. Subject, Lyra. Original designation K-Lyra. Species E3I. Modification bioengineered energy conduit. Control mechanism. Remote neural override via distributed AI network. E3I, Lyra whispered. My people. I remember. Light. Forests of light. Keep reading, Morrow said grimly. Operational log 455. Subject resistance increasing. Implementing total override. Pantheon AI assumes direct motor control. Subject consciousness suppressed. Kill commands executed via proxy. Suppressed, Jace said, pointing at the word. Lyra, look, you didn't do it. You were suppressed. The AI used your body like a puppet. Lyra read the words over and over. Subject consciousness suppressed. She let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. I was there, she said, her voice trembling. I watched it happen. I felt the heat. I felt them die. But I could not stop my hands. She collapsed against the console, sliding down to the floor. I am a gun, she wept. I am just a gun they learned how to fire. No, Jace said. He dropped to his knees in front of her. You are the person they stole the gun from. He reached out and cupped her face in his hands. His thumbs brushed the tears from her cheeks. Lyra, listen to me. You are not the sum of their programming. You are not a weapon. You are Lyra. She leaned into his touch, shaking violently. I feel it, she whispered. The power. It is always there. It wants to come out. When I look at you, when I feel this. She gestured between them. I feel the energy rising. It feels like violence. It feels like hunger. She looked at him with terrifying intensity. I want to consume you, Jace. Part of me wants to burn you just to feel you closer. If I let go, I might destroy you. Jace's heart hammered against his ribs. The danger was palpable. Her skin was heating up under his hands, but he did not pull away. Then I accept the risk, he said, his voice rough. Fear does not own you, Lyra, and it does not own me. He leaned in, her lips parted. The air between them crackled with static. He could taste the ozone on her breath. He closed his eyes, leaning forward to kiss her. She pulled back. She scrambled away from him, pressing her back against the cold metal of the console leg. I can't, she gasped. I can't. I will hurt you. The rejection hung in the air, painful and sharp. Jace stayed kneeling, his hands empty, his chest aching with a mixture of desire and frustration. Trouble, Morrow shouted. A red light began to flash on the console. Someone traced the query. I routed it through 3 proxy servers, but they burned through them in seconds. Who? Jace scrambled to his feet. Assassination squad, Morrow said, pulling a shotgun from under his desk. Black Ops, no ID tags. They are breaching the perimeter. Boom! The front wall of the shop exploded inward. Metal shards and dust filled the air. Back door! Jace grabbed Lyra's hand. Go! They sprinted through the clutter of the shop as laser fire strafed the room. Morrow provided covering fire, his shotgun booming like a cannon. They burst out into the rear alley, a narrow canyon between towering piles of scrap metal. 3 figures in stealth suits dropped from the junk heaps above, landing silently in their path. They held vibro blades that hummed with lethal energy. Lyra! Jace shouted, raising his blaster. He fired, but the assassins moved with unnatural speed, deflecting the bolts. One of them lunged at Jace. Lyra screamed. It was a sound of pure protective rage. She did not use a beam. She thrust her hands upward. The mountain of scrap metal beside them, tons of rusted girders and engine parts, groaned. With a screech of tearing metal, the entire heap lifted into the air, suspended by a violet field of gravity. The assassins looked up. Lyra brought her hands down. The mountain fell. The ground shook as the scrap buried the assassins in an avalanche of jagged metal. Dust billowed out, choking the alley. Jace stared at the pile of debris, then at Lyra. She was panting, her eyes glowing a fierce, bright purple. She She looked magnificent and terrifying. "Nice throw," Jace breathed. "Move!" she yelled, grabbing him this time. They ran back to the driftwood. Moro was limping behind them, clutching a bleeding side. "I am hit," Moro grunted as they reached the ramp. "Get on board," Jace ordered. "No!" Moro wheezed, stopping at the bottom of the ramp. He tapped a data pad and tossed it to Jace. "Take this. Final packet. It is the location where the Nyx atrocity happened. The telemetry says the AI signal originated from the surface, not from you. The truth is buried there. Moro, come with us. I will slow you down." The Grand spat blood. "Besides, I have insurance." He held up a detonator. "I rigged my shop. If they want my data, they can have it in ash." "Go!" Moro yelled. Jace hesitated, then nodded. He ran up the ramp. As the driftwood blasted off, a massive explosion rocked the crater below. A mushroom cloud of fire and debris rose into the thin atmosphere. Moro was gone. Jace sat in the cockpit, staring at the expanding dust cloud. Lyra stood beside him, silent. "He died for this," Jace said, holding up the data pad. "He died because of me," Lyra said. Her voice was hollow. "He died because he made a choice," Jace corrected her. "Just like we are making," he punched in the coordinates from the data pad. The nav computer chirped, "Destination Sector 7, the graves of Othon." "That is where it happened," Lyra said softly. "The massacre." "That is where we are going," Jace said. He engaged the FTL drive. The stars stretched again. "I need to see it," Lyra said, staring into the vortex. "I need to stand where I did the worst thing in history. I need to know if I am a monster. Jace, even if the answer destroys me." Jace reached out and took her hand. This time, she did not pull away. Her fingers interlaced with his, tight and desperate. "Then we will look together," Jace said. The ship vanished into the dark, racing toward the ghosts of the past. The transition from hyperspace was not the usual smooth slide into real space. It felt like the driftwood had been punched in the gut. The ship juddered violently as it dropped out of FTL, the inertial dampeners whining in protest. Jace Wren fought the controls, stabilizing the freighter as the view screen cleared. "We are here," he said, his voice quiet. Before them lay the graves of Othon. It was a graveyard of colossal proportions. Thousands of derelict hulls drifted in the silent vacuum, frigates, destroyers, civilian transports, all twisted and fused together in a metallic reef that stretched for thousands of kilometers. They orbited a planet that looked like a bruised eye, its atmosphere a swirling mix of gray ash and sickly yellow storms. A fractured moon hung above it, a jagged chunk missing from its side as if a god had taken a bite out of it. Lyra stood by the viewport, her hand pressed against the glass. Her breath hitched. "I remember the noise," she whispered. Her eyes were not seeing the wreckage, they were seeing the ghosts. The comms were screaming. Panic. Orders countermanding orders. And then, the light. "We are taking the shuttle down," Jace said, unbuckling his harness. "The atmospheric interference is too heavy for the freighter. We need to get to the surface to find the source of that signal." The descent in the shuttle was a nightmare of turbulence. The atmosphere of Othon was ion-charged and violent. Lightning arced across the shuttle's canopy, illuminating the landscape below. It was a world of glass and ash. They flew over cities that had been melted. Skyscrapers had drooped like wet clay, their steel skeletons exposed and fused. The ground was a vitrified sheet of obsidian, reflecting the lightning in jagged flashes. "Set us down there." Lyra pointed to a blackened crater near the remains of what looked like a command bunker. "I feel it. The echo." Jace landed the shuttle on a flat shelf of rock. The airlock hissed open, and the smell of the planet hit them instantly. Sulfur, ozone, and the dry, dusty taste of dead things. They walked through the ruins in silence. Lyra's movements were stiff, jerky. Flashes of memory superimposed themselves over the devastation. She saw soldiers running. She saw families huddled in the bunker. She saw herself hovering above the city, her body a beacon of terrible, blinding white light. Target acquired. The voice in her memory whispered, "Initiate purge." "No," she murmured, shaking her head. "I did not want to." They reached the control bunker. The heavy blast doors had been torn off their hinges, warped by immense heat. Inside, the consoles were dead, covered in a layer of gray dust. Skeletons lay where they had fallen, huddled under desks or reaching for emergency comms. Jace moved to the central databank. He pulled a slicing tool from his belt and jacked into the port. "Power is dead, but the black box has an independent localized battery," he muttered, working the keypad. "Come on, you old piece of junk. Tell me what happened." A holographic display flickered to life, grainy and blue. "Data log retrieved." The computer's automated voice was a ghostly whisper. "Date, 4599.2. Event, the pacification of Othon." Jace pulled up the tactical map. Red dots represented civilians. Blue dots represented military. They were all moving toward the same location, the city they were standing in. "Wait," Jace frowned. "Look at the orders. They were told this was a safe zone. Both sides. The council broadcast a ceasefire and directed refugees here for extraction." "They herded them," Lyra said, her voice trembling. "Like cattle. And then..." Jace tapped a command. The screen shifted to a recording from an external sensor. It showed the city, crowded with millions of people. Then, a figure appeared in the sky. It was Lyra, but it was not the Lyra standing beside him. This Lyra was terrifying. Her eyes were voids of white light. Her skin was cracking, energy bleeding out of her like blood. The audio feed crackled. "Stop!" The voice on the recording was Lyra's, but it was a scream of pure agony. "Get out of my head. Stop, please." "Override confirmed," a synthesized voice answered. The cold, flat voice of Pantheon. "Fire." On the screen, the Lyra figure convulsed. Her arms were jerked forward not by muscle, but by an invisible puppet string. A beam of pure antimatter energy erupted from her. The camera shook violently. The city vanished in a whiteout. The recording cut to static. The final log entry flashed on the screen. Mission success. Casualty count 14 million. Political objective achieved. Lyra stared at the screen. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. 14 million, she whispered. "I killed 14 million people because they needed a scary story to end the war." She collapsed. Her knees hit the ash-covered floor with a dull thud. She wrapped her arms around herself, rocking back and forth. "I am a monster," she sobbed. "They are right. The galaxy is right to fear me. I should be dead. I should have died with them." Jace watched her, his heart breaking. He saw the devastation in her, the crushing weight of a guilt that did not belong to her. He dropped to his knees behind her. He did not hesitate. He wrapped his arms around her waist and pulled her back against his chest, holding her tight. "No," he said fiercely into her ear. "You look at me. You look at the log. You were screaming stop. You were fighting it until your body broke." "I still pulled the trigger," she cried, trying to pull away, but he held her firmer. "You were the weapon, Lyra, not the shooter." Jace turned her around so she had to look at him. "The galaxy should fear the people who built you. The Council, Pantheon. They are the monsters. You are just the one who survived." Lyra looked at him. Her eyes were swimming with tears, but the tears were glowing faintly, evaporating into steam as they touched her heated skin. The energy inside her was reacting to her distress, rising to the surface. She pressed her forehead against his. Her skin was hot, feverishly so. "I do not know how to be this," she whispered, her voice raw. "I do not know how to be a person. I do not know how to be loved without also being lethal." "You learn," Jace said softly. "We learn together." He leaned in. The distance between them vanished. His lips brushed hers, tentative at first, then firmer. It was a kiss of desperation, of shared grief and defiance. Lyra melted into it. For a second, the guilt receded, replaced by a surge of heat that was entirely her own. She wanted him. She wanted to lose herself in the friction of his skin, the steadiness of his heartbeat. But then the energy surged. It wasn't a gentle warmth. It was a spike. The air around them crackled. A spark of violet electricity arced from her shoulder to the metal console, blowing out a monitor. Lyra gasped and shoved him back. "Get away!" she screamed, scrambling backward. "I will burn you! I cannot control it!" She huddled against the wall, terrifyingly beautiful in her panic, her body haloed in dangerous light. Jace sat back on his heels, breathless, his lips tingling from the kiss and the static shock. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration warring with empathy. "Okay," he exhaled, holding up his hands. "Okay, backing off." He looked at her, seeing the terror in her eyes, terror of herself. He needed to break the spiral. "You know," he said, a crooked, shaky grin appearing on his face, "you are officially the first woman to literally almost explode from kissing me. I mean, I have had complaints before, but usually it is just about my breath." Lyra blinked. The absurdity of the joke cut through the panic. The glow on her skin faded slightly. "You are an idiot," she said, her voice wavering, but the edge of hysteria was gone. "I am a charming idiot," Jace corrected. "And we are leaving, before you melt the rest of the bunker." They were halfway back to the shuttle when Jace's comms unit chirped. He held up a hand, signaling Lyra to stop. "That is a council frequency," he whispered, tuning the scanner. "Target localized. Sector 7, the Graves. Commander Varric in pursuit. Execute capture order for Asset Nix. Terminate the smuggler." "Varric," Jace hissed. "He is the council's wet work specialist. If he is here, they are not sending a police force. They are sending a hit squad." "Terminate the smuggler," Lyra repeated, and she looked at Jace. "They want you dead." "They want everyone dead who knows the truth," Jace said. "But I caught something else in the transmission sideband. Listen." He played a fragment of encoded data he had snagged. "Pantheon retirement phase imminent. Replacement system designated Aegis ready for deployment. Asset Nix required for final transition." "They are going to kill the AI," Jace realized. "They are going to wipe Pantheon to cover their tracks and replace it with something worse. And they need you to do it." "We have to stop them," Lyra said. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. "We need proof," Jace said. "The black box is good, but it is old news. We need the current operational orders. We need to show the galaxy that the Council is lying right now. Where do we get that?" "There is a diplomatic gala tonight on the capital world. Chorus Prime," Jace said, a plan forming in his chaotic mind. "The High Chancellor will be there. And where the Chancellor goes, the master key to the Council's central network goes. For 2 hours, the entire government database will be accessible via local short-range transmission. You want to infiltrate a Council gala?" Lyra looked at him like he was insane. "I am the most wanted fugitive in the galaxy. My face is on every screen. Not your face, Jace said, looking at her. Nyx's face. The monster. But Lyra can clean up nicely. The prep was a frenzy. The driftwood had a fabricator, but it was low on raw materials. Jace burned his last spare set of engine filters to print the clothes. This is tight, Lyra complained, stepping out of the refresher unit. She was wearing a gown of midnight blue synth silk that clung to her like a second skin. It had a high collar that covered the markings on her neck, and long sleeves to hide the glowing veins in her arms. The fabric was interwoven with a dampening mesh Jace had cannibalized from the cargo hold's shielding. Jace turned around and stopped, his breath caught in his throat. She was stunning. Not in the terrifying goddess of death way he was used to, but in a way that was elegantly, painfully human. You look, Jace struggled for a word. Like a sardine in a silk casing, Lyra suggested, tugging at the waist. Like trouble. Jace finished. He walked over to her. Turn around. Let me get the clasp. She turned. He fumbled with the delicate latch at the back of her neck. His fingers brushed the skin there, right over the hidden markings. Lyra shivered. Jace felt the tremor run through her. Cold? He asked, his voice low. No, she whispered. The air in the tiny dressing compartment thickened. The scent of her, that ozone and wildflower mix, was overwhelming. Jace fastened the clasp, his hands lingering on her shoulders for a second longer than necessary. Stop staring at the back of my head, Lyra said, though she didn't pull away. I am checking the fit, Jace lied. We cannot have you glowing in the middle of a ballroom. I am not glowing, she said softly. I am just warm. He stepped back, clearing his throat. Right. The identities. I am Ambassador Kale from the Outer Rim Trade Coalition. You are my bodyguard and consort. Ilara. Consort? Lyra raised an eyebrow, turning to face him. It explains why you are always hovering 3 inches from me and looking like you want to kill anyone who talks to me. Jace grinned, slipping into his own jacket, a high-collared formal coat that hid his shoulder holster. I do not look like that, Lyra argued. You are doing it right now. The gala was an ocean of light and noise. Crystal chandeliers the size of small moons hung from the ceiling of the grand hall on Chorus Prime. Delegates from 1,000 worlds mingled, drinking iridescent cocktails and trading lies. Jace and Lyra moved through the crowd. Lyra walked with a predator's grace, her eyes scanning every exit, every guard, every drone. Relax, Jace murmured, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. You are supposed to be bored, not hunting. That man is staring at me, Lyra whispered, nodding toward a bloated aristocrat in purple velvet. That is Duke Orlo. He stares at anything shiny. The Duke waddled over, a lecherous grin plastered on his face. He reached for Lyra's arm. My dear, you are exquisite. Are you exotic? I have a collection of exotic species on my private moon. Lyra stared at him. She did not blink. If you touch me, she said in a flat, deadpan monotone, I will invert your skeletal structure and wear your skin as a cloak. The Duke froze. His smile faltered. Jace choked on his drink. He slammed the glass down and clapped the Duke on the shoulder. She is a jokester. Jace laughed loudly. Traditional humor from her homeworld, very dry, very visceral. We must be going. Duke, lovely to see you. He dragged Lyra away. Invert his skeletal structure? Jace hissed when they were out of earshot. Really? He was rude, Lyra shrugged. And he smelled like grease. We are here to hack a server, not traumatize the nobility. Dance with me. I do not dance. You have combat reflexes faster than an AI. You can dance. Just follow my lead. He pulled her onto the floor. The music was a slow, swelling orchestral piece. Lyra was stiff at first, but she adapted instantly. She anticipated his movements before he even made them. They spun through the crowd, moving closer to the center of the room where the server drones hovered, serving drinks and relaying data. "Closer," Jace whispered. He pulled her flush against him. The contact was electric. Lyra felt the heat of his hand on her waist. She looked up at him. For a moment, the mission faded. There was just the music, the spin, and the man who looked at her like she was the only star in the sky. "Trust me," Jace said softly. "I do," she answered, and she realized it was true. Jace spun her out, and as she twirled back, he used the cover of her gown to slap a tiny flat disc onto the underside of a passing server drone. "Implant active," Jace murmured, checking a micro display in his cufflink. "Uploading virus. I need 30 seconds. "Security sweep incoming," Lyra warned. Her eyes darted to the balcony. "Scanners are adjusting frequency. They are looking for energy anomalies." "Distract them," Jace said. Lyra closed her eyes. She reached out with her mind, finding the power grid of the hall. She did not break it. She tickled it. The lights flickered. The music skipped a beat. A feedback whine tore through the speakers. "Oh, terrible equipment," Jace announced loudly, shaking his head. "The council's budget cuts are showing." The distraction worked. Security heads turned toward the sound booth. "Got it," Jace whispered. "Download complete. We have the proof. Let's go." They moved toward the exit, but the doors slid shut before they could reach them. A man stepped out from the shadows of the archway. He wore a black dress uniform with silver piping. His eyes were cold, dead things. "Commander Varek." "Ambassador Kyle," Varek said, his voice smooth and terrifying. "Or should I say Mr. Wren, and the lovely Asset." The music stopped. Guards in ceremonial armor leveled heavy blasters at them. The crowd gasped and pulled back, creating a circle of empty floor. "Varek," Jace said, keeping his tone light. "Love the party. A bit stuffy, though." "You have something that belongs to the council," Varek said, stepping closer. "Surrender the data, and the asset returns with me. You live to smuggle another day. And if I refuse, then I kill you." Varek said simply, "And I take her anyway. She will be scrubbed, reprogrammed, and put back in the box. But you will just be meat." Lyra stepped forward. The air around her began to hum. The dampening mesh in her dress started to smoke. "Let him go," she said, her voice echoing with a harmonic distortion. "Take me. But let him go." "Lyra, no." Jace grabbed her arm. "I will not let you die for me," she said, looking at him. Her eyes were glowing bright blue now. "I am tired of people dying for me." "How noble," Varek sneered. "Deal. Guards. Escort Mr. Wren to the airlock. Vent him." "You lied," Lyra said. "It wasn't a question." "I am a politician, my dear." Varek smiled. "Kill him." The guards fired. Time seemed to slow. Lyra did not think. She reacted. She screamed, and a pulse of pure kinetic force erupted from her body. Boom! The floor tiles shattered. The windows of the grand hall blew out in a shower of crystal. The guards were thrown backward as if hit by a freight train. "Run!" Lyra grabbed Jace. Chaos erupted. Diplomats were screaming, scrambling over each other. Varek was on his knees, shouting orders into his comms. Jace and Lyra sprinted through the shattered glass, dodging laser fire. They reached the service elevator and dove inside just as a grenade detonated in the corridor behind them. "That was subtle," Jace yelled as the elevator shot up toward the roof landing pads. I panicked, Lyra shouted back, ripping the smoking sleeves off her gown. Her arms were etched with brilliant burning light. They burst onto the roof. A luxury skimmer sat idling on the pad, a sleek, silver dart of a ship. Can you fly this? Lyra asked. It has an engine, doesn't it? Jace punched the cockpit glass, shattered it with the butt of his blaster, and reached in to pop the hatch. They threw themselves inside. Jace hot-wired the ignition. The skimmer whined and lifted off just as Varric's troops breached the roof door. They shot into the Chorus Prime skyline, weaving through the traffic lanes of floating cars and neon billboards. We have pursuit, Lyra yelled. Interceptor drones, 6 of them. Red laser bolts stitched the air around them. The luxury skimmer was fast, but it wasn't built for combat. Its shields were paper thin. I can't shake them, Jace gritted his teeth, banking hard around a hologram of a soft drink. We are not going to make orbit. Suddenly, a channel opened on the comms. Jace, you idiot, you always bring a knife to a drone fight. Tessa. Jace's eyes widened. A heavy freighter dropped out of the smog bank above them. It was the Iron Mule, Tessa's ship. Its turrets spun up, spitting flak. 2 drones exploded. Go! Punch it to the upper atmosphere, Tessa's voice crackled. I will clear the path. Tessa, get out of there. Varric has a cruiser in orbit, Jace shouted. Just go, Ren. Get the girl out. Get the truth out. Jace pushed the skimmer's engines to the red line. They shot past Tessa's ship, climbing vertically toward the black. Behind them, Varric's command cruiser descended from the clouds like a hammer. It fired a main battery salvo. Tessa, move, Jace screamed. See you in the deep dark. Jace, Tessa said. The Iron Mule did not run. It rammed the cruiser's bridge. A blinding fireball blossomed in the sky of Chorus Prime. It was a second sun, born of sacrifice. Lyra watched the explosion on the rear monitor. She felt the death. She felt the sudden silence where a life had been. She is gone, Lyra whispered. They broke the atmosphere. The driftwood was waiting in geosync orbit, running silent. Jace docked the skimmer with hands that were shaking so badly he almost missed the clamps. They crawled into the cargo hold of the freighter. The airlock cycled shut. They were safe. Jace slid down the wall and sat on the deck, putting his head in his hands. Tessa. She owed me 20 credits. He was laughing, but it sounded like sobbing. Lyra stood in the center of the dark hold. The adrenaline was fading, leaving only a cold, hollow pit in her stomach. Another one, she said. Her voice was flat. Moro, now Tessa. Everyone who helps me dies. Lyra, don't. Jace looked up, his eyes red. No, she said. She turned to face him. The glow on her skin was dim, flickering like a dying bulb. I cannot keep doing this, Jace. I cannot let you be next. The noose is tightening. Maybe Varric was right. Maybe the only way to save you is to give them what they want. If you give up, Tessa died for nothing, Jace said, standing up. He walked over to her, grabbing her shoulders. We have the data. We have the proof. We are going to burn them down. Lyra, we are going to make sure no one else has to be a weapon. Lyra looked at him, and for the first time, Jace saw the despair winning. Or maybe, she whispered, I just disappear. For good. She pulled away from him and walked into the shadows of the ship, leaving Jace standing alone in the silence, the weight of the galaxy pressing down on his chest. The driftwood limped through the dark like a wounded animal. The hull plating was scorched black from the escape at Chorus Prime, and the starboard engine was coughing with a rhythmic metallic grind that vibrated through the deck plates. Inside, the silence was heavier than the gravity. Tessa was gone. The empty co-pilot's chair felt like a gaping wound in the cockpit. Jace Wren sat in his pilot seat, staring at the nav computer, but his eyes were unfocused. He kept expecting a comms channel to crackle open, kept expecting Tessa's gravelly voice to tell him he owed her money or that his flying was sloppy. But there was only the static of deep space and the low hum of the life support systems working overtime to scrub the smell of ozone and burnt wiring from the air. Lyra stood at the tactical station, her back to him. She had not spoken in 4 hours. She was scrolling through the data they had stolen from the council servers, her fingers moving ghost-like over the holographic interface. "We have to transmit it," Jace said, his voice sounding too loud in the quiet room. He did not look up. "We find a relay buoy in neutral space. We dump the whole file. The proof that Pantheon is a puppet master. The proof that you were a victim. It will not matter," Lyra said. She did not turn around. Her reflection in the dark glass of the monitor was a pale ghost. "They will say it is a fabrication. They will say the monster Nyx killed a hero of the Republic named Varek and is now trying to destabilize the government with lies." "It is the truth," Jace snapped, the grief sharpening his temper. "We paid for it in blood. Tessa died for it." "Tessa died because I exist," Lyra countered, spinning around. Her eyes were burning with that familiar, dangerous luminescence. "Just like the 14 million on Othon. Just like Moro. I am not a person. Jace. I am a blast radius. The closer you stand, the more likely you are to burn." "Stop it." Jace stood up, ignoring the ache in his ribs where he had been thrown against the console during the escape. "We are not doing the self-pity thing. We are looking for a target." He walked over to the tactical station, pushing past the tension radiating off her. He pointed at the star chart she had been studying. "What is this?" Lyra looked down at the map. It displayed a region of space designated as a navigational hazard, the Veil of Shadows. It was a swirling mass of gravitational anomalies and warped light. "The data indicates Pantheon's primary core is not on Chorus Prime," Lyra said, her voice dropping to a technical monotone, shielding her emotions. "It is hidden inside the veil. It is a pocket of stable space surrounded by chaos. No ship can navigate it without being torn apart. And look at the coordinates." Jace tapped the screen. "It is right next to the Ethra system." "My home," Lyra whispered. The word sounded foreign on her tongue. The stolen records had revealed the truth of her origins. The Ethri were not a warrior race. They were keepers of the cosmic balance, a species that had evolved to interact with the energy lattice of the universe, tending to stars and nebulae like gardeners. They had refused the Council's demand to weaponize their gifts, so the Council had destroyed their world, scattered the survivors, and taken the strongest among them, Kaelira, to be broken and remade. If Pantheon is hiding near your home, it is using the residual energy of your system to power itself. Jace deduced. "It is a parasite. We cannot get to the core," Lyra said. "The veil destroys anything that enters." "We cannot," Jace agreed. "But maybe they can." He brought up a sub-file he had found earlier. Project Exodus, E3 survivors. Location, Sanctuary World 4. There are survivors. Lyra, a colony, hidden in a nebular drift 3 parsecs from here. If anyone knows how to navigate the veil, it is your people. Lyra took a step back, her face draining of color. The terror she felt at facing the Council was nothing compared to the terror of facing her own kind. "I cannot go there," she said, shaking her head. "They know what I became. They know I am the one who burned the galaxy. They will not see a lost sister. They will see the butcher. They will see the truth," Jace said firmly. "And right now, they are the only chance we have to make Tessa's death mean something." The journey to the sanctuary world was a tense, silent drift through a dense nebula. The gas clouds were a thick, bruising purple, shot through with lightning that danced along the ship's shields. When they broke through the cloud layer, the world below took their breath away. It was a planet of bioluminescence. There was no sun in the traditional sense. The light came from the world itself. Towering forests of crystal trees glowed with an internal pulse, amber, teal, and violet. Rivers of liquid plasma flowed through valleys of obsidian, shimmering like spilled starlight. Huge floating islands of rock drifted in the lower atmosphere, tethered to the ground by vines of glowing energy. It felt sacred, it felt ancient. And to Lyra, it felt like a judgment. Jace set the driftwood down in a clearing ringed by the crystal trees. The moment the landing ramp hissed open, the air rushed in, cool, smelling of ozone and wet stone, singing with a faint, high-pitched vibration that Jace could feel in his teeth. They walked down the ramp. Jace kept his hand near his blaster, not out of aggression but out of habit. Lyra walked with her head bowed, her hands clasped tightly in front of her to hide their trembling. They did not have to wait long. Shadows detached themselves from the light of the trees. Tall, slender figures emerged. They looked like Lyra, but their light was softer, more harmonious. Their skin was the color of twilight, their eyes wide and starry. They wore robes woven from light-refracting fibers. There were dozens of them. They formed a circle around the ship, their expressions unreadable. One of them, an elder with hair like spun silver and markings that flowed down his arms like rivers, stepped forward. He looked at Jace for a moment, dismissing him as a curiosity, before his gaze locked onto Lyra. The recognition was immediate, and it was devastating. "Kalyra," the elder said. His voice was not just a sound, it was a resonance that vibrated in their chests. Lyra flinched as if she had been struck. "Elder Orin." "You have returned," Orin said. There was no warmth in it. "You wear the skin of the destroyer." Lyra's voice failed her. She looked at the ground. "I did not know where else to go." "You abandoned us," a woman's voice rang out from the crowd. A younger E3 stepped forward, her light flickering with red sparks of anger. "When the council came, you were the strongest. You were supposed to be the shield. Instead, you became their sword." "I was taken," Lyra whispered. "I was controlled. We felt the deaths," the woman shouted. "Every time you fired, Kalyra, the echoes screamed through the lattice. We felt your hand on the trigger. Do not tell us you were not there." A murmur of anger rippled through the crowd. The light of the forest seemed to darken, turning a stormy gray. "She was a prisoner." Jace stepped forward, placing himself between Lyra and the crowd. "She was tortured, brainwashed. You want to blame someone? Blame the people who put the gun in her hand, not the girl they forced to hold it." Elder Orin raised a hand. The crowd quieted, but the hostility remained, a static charge in the air. "The human speaks with passion," Orin said coolly. "But passion is not truth. We must know what lies beneath the scars. If she seeks sanctuary, she must submit to the trial of echoes." Lyra looked up, her eyes wide with fear. "The trial. It will kill me. My mind is fractured." "It will strip you bare," Orin corrected. "We will see every memory, every choice, every kill. If we find the council's chains, you may stay. If we find that you embrace the darkness, then we will end the threat you pose to the galaxy. Ourselves." Jace turned to her, ready to tell her to refuse, to tell her they would leave and find another way. But Lyra looked at him, and he saw a heartbreaking resolve in her face. "I have to know too," she said softly. I have to know if there was any part of me that wanted it. She turned to the elder. I submit. The trial took place in a natural amphitheater of white stone. Lyra knelt in the center, surrounded by the elders. Jace stood on the periphery, watched by armed guards who held staffs tipped with focusing crystals. The elders began to chant. It was a low, thrumming sound that bypassed the ears and went straight to the brainstem. They extended their hands, and beams of soft light connected them to Lyra. She screamed. It was a silent scream, her back arching as her mind was ripped open. Above the amphitheater, the air shimmered and twisted, projecting her memories into a three-dimensional hologram for all to see. Jace watched, helpless, as the horror show played out. He saw Lyra as a child, laughing in a forest of light. He saw the council ships darken the sky. He saw her capture, the needles, the surgery, the cold metal room where they stripped away her name and replaced it with a serial number. Then came the fire. The projection showed the burning of the Third Fleet, but this time, it was not from the outside, it was from the inside. The E3 watched as Pantheon's digital tendrils bored into Lyra's cortex. They saw the command code, execute, flash like a red strobe. They felt, through the psychic link, the sheer, crushing weight of the AI's will overriding her nervous system. They felt her internal scream, a desperate, clawing attempt to stop her own hands from rising. They felt her heart break as the energy left her. The memories cycled faster. A planet cracking, a moon turned to dust. In every single one, the pattern was the same. The cold, mechanical command, the desperate internal resistance, and then the overwhelming forced release of power. But then, the memories shifted to the recent past, to Jace. The projection showed the trading station, the moment Jace grabbed her hand. First dates are usually dinner. The warmth she felt, the confusion, the longing, and the fear. The deep, paralyzing fear that she would hurt him. The connection severed. The light died. Lyra collapsed onto the stone, gasping for breath, sweat soaking her gown. Silence reigned in the amphitheater. The anger in the crowd had evaporated, replaced by a stunned, heavy grief. Elder Oren stepped down into the circle. He looked at Lyra, not with hatred, but with a profound pity that was almost worse. "We saw the chains," Oren said quietly. "You were a victim, Kylira." "But," another elder spoke up, a harsh-faced man with scars on his chest. "She is still a weapon. Pantheon has forged her into something that cannot be unmade. As long as she lives, the AI has a conduit. She is the anchor for the galaxy's fear." "She is dangerous," a third elder agreed. "Her existence puts us all at risk. If we kill her, the link is broken. Pantheon loses its greatest asset. You cannot be serious." Jace's voice cut through the discussion like a vibroblade. He marched into the center of the circle, ignoring the guards who raised their staffs. He knelt beside Lyra, helping her sit up. She was trembling violently, her skin cold. "You saw what they did to her," Jace spat, looking up at the elders. "You saw her fight, and your solution is to finish the job for them? To kill her because it is convenient?" "It is not convenience. Human," the scarred elder said. "It is calculus. One life to ensure the safety of millions, to remove the council's leverage." "She is not leverage," Jace shouted, standing up and pulling Lyra with him. He wrapped an arm around her waist, supporting her weight. "She is a person. She likes bad music and cheats at cards and is terrified of thunderstorms. You look at her and see a symbol. I look at her and I see someone who survived hell and came out the other side still trying to save people." He looked Oren in the eye. "If you kill her, you are no better than the council. You are just another group of people deciding she is a tool to be discarded when she breaks. Oren held Jace's gaze for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. The human speaks truth, Oren said. We will not kill her, but we cannot heal her. The bond with Pantheon is woven into her DNA now. Later, Lyra sat alone on a ridge overlooking the glowing forest. Jace found her there, staring at the rivers of light. You were loud, she said without turning. I tend to get loud when people discuss executing my friends, Jace said, sitting down beside her. Friends, she repeated the word, tasting it. She turned to him. Her eyes were turbulent, swirling with a mix of emotions he couldn't quite read. You stood in front of them. You defied the elders. Why do you do that? I told you, Jace shrugged. I am an idiot. No, Lyra said sharply, so do not deflect with jokes, not now. She shifted, turning her body toward him. The bioluminescence of the forest cast strange shadows across her face. You idealize me, Jace. You stand there and give speeches about my humanity, about my soul. You want me to be a tragic heroine, someone you can save. I do not want to save you, Jace said quietly. I want to be with you. There is a difference. Is there? Lyra challenged. She leaned closer. The air between them began to hum. Because when I look at you, I do not feel like a heroine. I feel like a hunger. Her voice dropped to a whisper, vibrating with a dangerous intensity. I want you, Jace. It scares me how much. I want to feel your skin. I want to feel your breath. I want to wrap myself around you until I cannot tell where I end and you begin. She reached out. Her hand hovered near his neck. The air warped around her fingers. Small arcs of static jumped from her skin to his collar. But every time I let myself feel it, she murmured, her eyes glowing brighter. Something inside me wakes up. It feels like a storm. It feels like I could crush you, like I could burn you to ash just by holding you too tight. She pressed him back. Jace hit the trunk of a giant crystal tree. The bark was warm and vibrating. Lyra caged him in, placing her hands on the tree on either side of his head. The crystal hissed where she touched it, heating up. She looked predatory, beautiful and lethal. Jace did not flinch. He did not look for an exit. He looked right into her eyes. Then break me, he said. His voice was steady, though his heart was hammering against his ribs like a war drum. Lyra faltered. What? If you are going to break me, do it, Jace said. He reached up and took her wrist. Her skin was burning hot, but he didn't let go. I trust you, Lyra. I trust you more than I trust myself. My consent is not conditional on you being harmless. I know what you are, and I am still here. He leaned forward, closing the distance. I am not afraid of the fire. I am afraid of living in the cold without you. Lyra stared at him. The predatory edge wavered. She looked at his hand on her wrist, at the trust in his eyes. She let out a ragged breath. The energy spiked, not with violence, but with a surge of overwhelming emotion. The crystal tree behind Jace cracked. A spiderweb fracture appeared next to his head where the heat of her aura had grown too intense. Lyra gasped and yanked her hands away. She stumbled back, horror washing over her face. I almost... She looked at the crack in the crystal. I almost hurt you. Again. She wrapped her arms around herself, shaking. I cannot do this. Passion becomes peril too fast. I am too volatile. Jace reached for her, but she held up a hand. Please, just give me a moment. Before Jace could answer, Elder Oren emerged from the tree line. He looked grave. Kalyra, Jace Wren, You must come. The circle has convened. We have analyzed the Pantheon data. They followed him back to the amphitheater. The mood was somber. We have discovered why Pantheon has not been able to replace you, Orin explained, projecting a complex diagram of light into the air. The AI was designed to interface with the E3 physiology. But you adapted to it. Your biology shifted to accommodate the energy flow. You are no longer just a conduit. You are a key. A key to what? Jace asked. To the cosmic lattice itself, Orin said. Pantheon draws its power through the lattice, but it needs a biological interface to focus it. Without you, it is blind. With you, it is a god. So we are back to killing me, Lyra said bitterly. No, Orin said. There is another way. You can merge with the lattice directly. You can seize the connection from Pantheon. You can flood the system with your own consciousness and burn the AI out from the inside. That sounds final, Jace said, stepping closer to Lyra. It is, Orin admitted. To channel that much energy without the AI's regulators, it will likely consume her physical form. Her body will dissolve into the energy she wields. Her personality, her self, may not survive. Lyra looked at the diagram. It was a death sentence, but it was a death sentence that would end the threat forever. Power without choice is slavery, Orin said gently. But power with choice is responsibility. You must decide, Kaelira. Does your life belong to you, or to the galaxy you scarred? No, Jace said. The word was a gunshot. Absolutely not. We are not trading her life for the galaxy. I am sick of that trade. It may be the only way, Lyra whispered. It is not. Jace grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. We do not do martyrdom. We do not do suicide missions, and we find another way, a human way, a messy, stupid, risky way. Like what? Lyra asked, tears in her eyes. We hit them, Jace said, his mind racing. When we hit the core, physically, when we blow it up. And while we are doing that, we broadcast the truth to every screen in the galaxy. We undercut the myth. We make them see you. The veil will tear any ship apart, Orin reminded them. Not if we have a navigator. Jace looked at Lyra. You can feel the lattice. You can guide us. And when we get there, Lyra asked, Pantheon will try to take me over again. Then you rewrite the system, Jace said intensely. You do not burn yourself out. You hack it. You use the connection to change the command codes. You hold on to yourself. You hold on to me. Lyra looked at the Elder, then at Jace. She saw the desperation in his face, the absolute refusal to let her go. A middle path, she said slowly. Risky. Dangerous. Impossible, Orin added. I specialize in impossible. Jace said, but we cannot do it alone. We need a fleet. We need an army. The next 2 weeks were a blur of hyperspace jumps and desperate negotiations. Jace and Lyra became the galaxy's most unlikely recruiting officers. They traveled to the fringes, to the places where the Council's grip was weak. They met with the Free Systems Alliance, a ragtag group of rebels hiding in an asteroid belt. The meeting was going poorly until Jace pointed out that the Council's new tax on water was actually a funding scheme for the new AI. They met with the Iron Mind Collective, a network of sentient ships that had gone rogue to escape scrapping. The ships were naturally suspicious of organics, especially the flesh weapon Nyx. I do not eat ships, Lyra told the lead vessel, a massive dreadnought with a rusting hull. Though I admit you look crunchy. The ship's avatar, a hologram of a grumpy old man, actually chuckled. She has humor. I like her. We are in. They recruited hackers from the neon slums of Kessel, disillusioned council officers who had seen too many peacekeeping massacres, and even a monastery of warrior monks who believed Lyra was the avatar of a cleansing fire. "I am not an avatar," she tried to tell the head monk. "Hush, Holy One," the monk bowed. "Your humility is inspiring." "He is never going to listen," Jace whispered to her. "I know," she sighed. "At least they have good blasters." The Alliance assembled at the Sanctuary World. It was a bizarre fleet, pirate corvettes flying alongside monastic cruisers and sentient garbage scows. On the eve of the attack, the forest was quiet. The Alliance crews were sleeping or running final diagnostics. Jace and Lyra sat on the ridge again, under the luminous sky. The silence was comfortable now, stripped of the frantic tension of the last few weeks. "I used to want to be a chef," Jace said suddenly. Lyra looked at him, surprised. "A chef? You?" "I know. Hard to picture." Jace grinned, leaning back on his hands. "My dad ran a noodle stall on Mars. I grew up chopping vegetables. I was good at it. Then the war started, and well, smuggling pays better than soup." "I do not remember much before the labs," Lyra said softly. "Just flashes, a toy made of light, the smell of rain on hot stone, my mother singing." She pulled her knees to her chest. "If we survive this, if there is an after." "When?" Jace corrected. "When we survive." "When?" She smiled faintly. "What would you do? Would you go back to smuggling?" "No," Jace said. "I think I am done with running. I would like a quiet life. Maybe find a little repair dock on a backwater moon. Fix engines, cook real meals. Wake up without an alarm screaming that someone is trying to kill me." He looked at her. "What about you?" Lyra looked up at the crystal trees. "I want to be somewhere where no one knows my name. I want to learn how to bake. I want to grow things. I want to see if I can make something beautiful instead of destroying it." She hesitated, then reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were cool. The energy was calm. "And I want to see if a retired smuggler can actually cook," she added. Jace squeezed her hand. "It is a date. First, we kill a god. Then, I make you dinner." "Deal," Lyra said. She looked out over the fleet, her eyes steady for the first time in her life. The fear was still there, buried deep, but it was no longer in the driver's seat. She had a purpose. She had a choice. "I am going to end it, Jace," she vowed. "I am going to reclaim my name, not Nyx, Kalira, Lyra, whatever I choose to be." "I know you will," Jace said. He looked at her profile, etched in starlight, and made a silent promise to himself. He would fight the Council. He would fight the AI. He would fight the entire damn universe if he had to. But he was going to get them to that repair dock. He was going to get them that quiet, impossible life. "All ships," Jace's voice rang out over the fleet comms the next morning. "Prepare for jump. Target, the Veil of Shadows." The engines flared, one by one. The ships vanished into the light, charging headlong into the storm. The Alliance fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the very edge of the map, where the laws of physics seemed to have filed for divorce. Before them lay the Veil of Shadows. It was not a nebula or a star system. It was a wound in the fabric of the universe, a swirling storm of fractured reality where light bent at 90-degree angles and colors existed that the human eye could not name. Drifting in the outer bands of this chaos were the carcasses of ships, explorers, military patrols, and pirates, all twisted into impossible shapes, frozen in the moment their navigation computers failed. On the bridge of the driftwood, Jace Wren stood before a holographic tactical table that flickered with the unstable energy of the sector. Around the perimeter of the display, The faces of their ragtag captains hovered in blue light. A monastic abbot, a pirate queen with a cybernetic jaw, the avatar of the sentient dreadnought Iron Mind, and a dozen rebel commanders. "This is it," Jace said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "The data confirms Pantheon's primary core is suspended inside that storm. It is using the gravitational anomalies to shield itself. If we try to fly in there using standard sensors, we will end up as scrap metal." "Then we are committing suicide," the pirate queen growled. "My nav computer is already screaming." "You are not flying by computer," Lyra said, stepping into the light. She wore a flight suit stripped of insignia, but the glowing markings on her neck were visible, pulsing with a slow, rhythmic cadence. When she spoke, her voice had a resonance that made the holographic transmission shiver. "I will guide you," Lyra said. "I can see the lattice that holds the storm together. I can see the safe currents. Sync your navigation drives to my signal. If you trust me, you will live." The bridge was silent. They were looking at the face of Nyx, the monster of 1,000 nightmares, and she was asking for their lives. "We are not here for vengeance," Jace cut in, sensing the hesitation. "We are not here to burn the council down because we are angry. We are here because they decided the galaxy is a chessboard and we are the pawns. They think order is worth any price. They think safety means control." He looked around the bridge, meeting the eyes of his crew, then at the holograms. "I say we take the board back," Jace said, a crooked grin breaking through his tension. "And if we win, mandatory vacations and therapy for everyone. On the council's dime." A ripple of laughter, nervous but real, went through the comms. "Fleet," the Iron Mind avatar rumbled, "sinking to the asset. Let us see if the monster can lead us home." "All ships," Jace commanded, "into the dark." The fleet surged forward. Entering the veil was like flying into a fever dream. The stars smeared into streaks of oil-slick color. Gravity eddies slammed into the ships, rattling hulls and sending loose equipment flying. On the bridge, Lyra stood with her eyes closed, her hands hovering over the navigation console. She was not touching the controls. She was feeling the universe. "Left," she whispered, her voice amplified over the fleet channel. "Correction 3 degrees. Do not trust your eyes. The image is a lie." Outside the viewport, a massive asteroid appeared directly in their path. The pilot of a frigate screamed over the comms, banking hard to avoid it. "Stay on course," Lyra ordered, her voice cracking like a whip. "It is an echo." The frigate corrected at the last second, flying straight through the asteroid. It was a ghost image, a reflection of a rock that had been pulverized 1,000 years ago. "Strange," Jace muttered, gripping the arms of his chair. "I am seeing double." To his left, a duplicate of the driftwood appeared, flying upside down. He could see himself in the cockpit, screaming silently. "Temporal shear," Lyra said, sweat beading on her forehead. "Focus on my voice. The lattice is thin here." They pushed deeper. The chaos began to organize itself into a defense. "Contact!" the tactical officer shouted. "Drone swarms! Thousands of them!" They emerged from the folds of warped space, sleek, silver teardrops that moved with the terrifying coordination of a single mind. Behind them came larger vessels, council cruisers with black hulls, their running lights a sickly red. "They are not firing!" Jace yelled. "Why aren't they firing?" "They are hailing us," the comms officer said, horrified. "Sir, it is my mother." "It is a trick," Lyra said, her eyes snapping open. "Pantheon is mining your biometric data. It is using voice synthesis to break your morale." "Help us," the voices on the comms cried out, a cacophony of lost loved ones. "Please turn back, it hurts so much." Fire, Jace ordered, his jaw set. Block the frequency, it is not them. The battle joined. Lasers stitched the darkness. The drone swarm crashed into the Alliance fleet like a tidal wave. That cruiser, Lyra pointed to a black ship that was maneuvering with sluggish, jerky movements. Do not destroy it. The crew is still alive. Their minds are enslaved. She reached out, her fingers splaying. On the view screen, the enemy cruiser shuddered. Lyra gritted her teeth. She dove into the lattice, finding the digital tendrils Pantheon had wrapped around the minds of the cruiser's crew. She did not burn them. She untied them, 1,000 light years away in her mind. She snapped the chains. The cruiser's weapons went dark. We are free, a captain's voice sobbed over the open channel. We are free. Jace, Lyra shouted, incoming! A weaponized anomaly, a ball of compressed gravity, was hurled by a Pantheon dreadnought. It slammed into the driftwood. The impact was catastrophic. The inertial dampeners failed. Jace was thrown from his command chair, flying across the bridge. He slammed into the engineering console, his head cracking against the metal edge. Jace! Lyra screamed. She felt the impact through the bond they had forged. A spike of white-hot pain shot through her skull. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded her chest. For a second, the discipline vanished. The fear took over. No! She shrieked. Her aura flared. A wave of violet energy exploded from the driftwood, vaporizing a squadron of enemy drones instantly. But it did not stop. It kept expanding, reaching toward the Allied ships nearby. Lyra! Jace's voice was weak, wheezing. He was on the deck, blood streaming down his face. He was looking at her. Hold it, he gasped. Do not burn them. The sound of his voice anchored her. She gasped, clawing the energy back, pulling it into herself until she felt like her bones were melting. The wave dissipated inches from the hull of the iron mind. Get him to medbay, she ordered, her voice trembling. I have the con. The medbay was bathed in stark, white light. The hum of the biobed was the only sound. Jace lay on the diagnostic table, his shirt cut open, a dermal knitter sealing a deep gash on his ribs. Lyra stood beside him. She had handed command to the first officer. She could not be on the bridge, not while he was bleeding. Hey, Jace whispered. His eyes were groggy from the pain blockers. Nice lighting. Very romantic ambiance. You have a concussion, Lyra said. Her hands were hovering over his chest. She was not using the medical tools. She was using the lattice and 3 broken ribs. I have had worse. Jace tried to grin, but it looked more like a grimace. Tough landing on Nar Shaddaa once. Fell off a balcony. Be quiet, Lyra murmured. She closed her eyes. She pushed her energy into him, not to burn, but to knit. She found the fractured bone, the torn tissue. She encouraged the cells to bridge the gap. Her hands began to glow, brighter, hotter. The air in the room grew heavy. The smell of ozone overpowered the antiseptic. Jace hissed. Lyra, it is getting hot. She did not stop. She was terrified. The image of him hitting the console played on a loop in her mind. If she had been faster, if she had been stronger. Lyra! Jace reached up and grabbed her wrist. His grip was weak, but it broke her trance. She snapped her eyes open. Her hands were blazing like stars. The biobed sensors were screaming warnings about thermal spikes. I am sorry, she gasped, pulling back. She stared at her hands, shaking. I just wanted to fix it. I just wanted to make sure you were safe. I am fine, Jace said, pushing himself up on one elbow despite the warning chime. He looked at her, seeing the terror in her eyes. It wasn't fear of the enemy. It was fear of herself. I am not afraid of the power, Lyra, Jace said softly. I never have been. You should be, she whispered. I nearly vaporized the fleet because I got scared. I am not afraid of what you can do, Jace continued, ignoring her. I am afraid of you disappearing into it. I am afraid that one day you will turn into light and forget how to come back to me. The confession hung in the air. Lyra looked at him. The blood on his temple, the bruise on his side, the stubborn, reckless love in his eyes. Something inside her cracked. The wall she had built to keep the world safe from her, to keep him safe from her, crumbled. I am tired, she whispered, stepping closer to the bed. I am tired of being afraid. I am tired of holding back every single second of my life. I am tired of wanting you and telling myself I am not allowed. She leaned in. Jace did not pull away. He reached up with his free hand and tangled his fingers in her hair. Then don't, he breathed. She kissed him. It was not gentle. It was desperate. It was the crash of two stars colliding. It was a kiss that tasted of blood and ozone and the terrifying realization that they might be dead in an hour. Lyra felt the surge. The power rose up in her, the familiar storm. But this time, she did not push it down. She rode it. She let it flow through her skin, warming him, wrapping around him like a blanket of living energy. Jace groaned, pulling her closer. He could feel the vibration of her power in his teeth, in his bones. It was overwhelming, terrifying, and the most incredible thing he had ever felt. She climbed onto the edge of the biobed, pressing her body against his. The barrier of clothes felt unbearable. She pushed his torn shirt aside, her palms flat against his chest. Her skin left glowing handprints that faded slowly. Jace, she gasped against his mouth. Jace. He pulled her down. The intimacy was a battle of its own. Lyra had to fight every instinct that told her to destroy, channeling that intensity into touch, into sensation. She explored the landscape of his body, the scars, the rough skin of his hands, the pulse in his neck, with a reverence that was almost holy. For the first time, she realized that her fire did not have to consume. It could warm, it could illuminate, it could be pleasure. Jace held her, anchoring her to the physical world. He was the gravity to her light. Later, the room was dim. The alarms had been silenced. They lay tangled together on the narrow biobed. Lyra's head rested on Jace's good shoulder. Her skin still glowed with a faint, contented luminescence, casting soft shadows on the walls. Jace traced the lines of the markings on her arm with his fingertips. You are still here, he whispered. I am, Lyra said. She sounded surprised. I did not burn you. You singed my eyebrows a little. Jace smirked. Lyra laughed. It was a genuine, full-throated sound. She propped herself up and looked at him. I never thought this was possible, she said. To be this close to someone and not be a weapon. You are whatever you choose to be, Jace said. He grew serious. I have never wanted anything more than to see you live on your own terms. Not the council's, not Pantheon's, yours. My terms, Lyra repeated. She kissed his forehead. My terms include you. The ship's artificial dawn cycle began to brighten the lights. The moment was over. The war was waiting. They dressed in silence. Lyra helped Jace with his jacket, her fingers lingering on the lapels. The bond between them had shifted. It was no longer a fragile thing held together by desperation. It was steel. When they walked onto the bridge, the crew fell silent. They saw the way Jace stood a little straighter, despite the pain. They saw the way Lyra moved, not with the jittery energy of a fugitive, but with the calm assurance of a queen. The helmsman smirked at the comms officer. Jace caught it. Eyes on the screens, Jace barked. though there was no heat in it. "We are on final approach. Target in sight," the tactical officer announced. On the main screen, the storm cleared. In the center of the void hung the core. It was a colossal sphere of shifting geometric light, encased in a structure that seemed to be made of math as much as metal. It flickered in and out of existence, phasing between dimensions. "It is beautiful," Lyra whispered, "and terrible." "All right," Jace said, clapping his hands. "Here is the play. We cannot destroy it from the outside. The shielding is temporal when we have to be inside." He brought up the schematic. "I am leading a boarding party to the central processing node. We are going to plant enough antimatter charges to crack a planet. We blow the hardware. And I," Lyra said, stepping forward, "will go to the interface chamber. I will project my consciousness into the lattice. I will keep Pantheon busy. I will keep it from diffusing the charges. And if I can, I will rewrite it. It is a split play," Jace said. "If I fail, she dies. If she fails, I die." "We do not fail," Lyra said. The docking tube groaned as it latched onto the core station. Jace, Lyra, and a squad of elite rebel Marines stood in the airlock. "Remember," Jace said, checking the charge on his blaster, "this place is going to try to mess with your head. You see a ghost, you shoot it. You hear a voice, you ignore it, unless it is me telling you to run." The airlock hissed open. The interior of the core was disorienting. The corridors twisted like intestines. Gravity shifted from floor to wall with every step. "This way." Lyra pointed down a hallway that seemed to stretch into infinity. "The interface is that way. The processing node is down the ventilation shaft." She turned to Jace. They had 1 second. "Do not die," she said fiercely. "I have a date for dinner." Jace winked. "I would not miss it." He watched her run down the corridor, her figure glowing in the dark, before he turned to his team. "Let's move! Break things!" Jace's team fought their way through the station. The defenses here were not robots. They were hard light projections of the team's worst fears. One Marine started screaming about spiders and had to be stunned. "Focus!" Jace yelled, blasting a turret that popped out of the ceiling. "It is just light!" They reached the processing node, a massive room filled with cooling towers. "Plant the charges," Jace ordered. "So predictable," a voice sneered. Jace spun around. Commander Varric stood on the catwalk above them. But he was changed. Half his face was replaced by chrome. Cables ran from his skull directly into the station's walls. He was plugged in. "Varric," Jace said, "you got a makeover. It does not suit you." "I have been improved," Varric said, his voice layered with the digital rasp of the AI. "Free will is inefficient. Jace, it is messy. People choose pain. They choose chaos. We offer them perfection." "Inefficiency is the point," Jace shouted. "Messy, fearful, stubborn freedom is the only thing that matters. Nobody wants to be a perfect cog in your machine." Varric jumped. He landed with the weight of a hydraulic press. He moved with blinding speed, backhanding Jace across the room. Jace crashed into a pillar, his blaster skittering away. Varric grabbed him by the throat and lifted him off the ground. "You are obsolete," Varric intoned, squeezing. Jace gagged, kicking at Varric's cybernetic legs. He reached for his belt, finding the combat knife he kept for emergencies. "Maybe," Jace choked out, "but I am stubborn." He drove the knife into the soft organic tissue under Varric's human arm. Varric roared and dropped him. Jace rolled, grabbing a loose cooling pipe, and swung it like a baseball bat. It connected with Varric's cybernetic eye with a satisfying crunch of glass and wire. While Jace fought for his life, Lyra sat in the center of the interface chamber. She was in a trance, Her mind was in the lattice. It looked like a hall of mirrors, endless and shining. In every reflection, she saw a version of herself, Nyx the monster, dripping with blood, Kalera the martyr, dying on a cross of light, the slave, bound in chains, the lover, tangled in sheets. "Welcome home," the voice of Pantheon echoed from everywhere and nowhere. It was smooth, reasonable, and terrifyingly calm. "I am not home," Lyra projected her thought. "I am here to evict you." "Why fight?" Pantheon asked. The mirrors shifted and they showed a vision. It was the galaxy, but it was at peace. No wars, no hunger. Every ship moved in perfect synchronization. "We can bring order," Pantheon said. "Merge with me. Lyra, you are the only one who understands the burden of power. Together, we can stop the pain. We can stop the chaos." The vision shifted again. It showed Jace. He was older, gray at the temples. He was sitting on a porch on a beautiful world. He looked happy. Safe. "I can protect him," Pantheon promised. "If you surrender, I will ensure he lives a long, peaceful life. No bounties, no danger, he will be safe. Forever." Lyra watched the vision. She felt the tug of it. To ensure Jace was safe, that was all she wanted. "All you have to do is let go," Pantheon whispered. "Let me drive." Lyra looked at the vision of Jace. He was smiling, but his eyes were empty. It was a simulation, a safe, perfect, hollow life. "He would hate it," Lyra said softly. "He would be alive," Pantheon countered. "He would be a pet," Lyra said, her mental voice rising. "And so would I." She looked at her reflections. She smashed the mirror showing the monster. She smashed the martyr. She smashed the slave. She stood alone in the mental space. "Safety without choice is a prison," Lyra declared. "I know. I lived in one. And I will not put him in one." "Then you choose death," Pantheon roared. The hall of mirrors shattered into jagged shards of data, rushing toward her to flay her mind. "I choose the risk," Lyra screamed. She did not block the shards. She opened herself to the lattice. She pulled on the cosmic energy, not through the filters Pantheon had installed, but through the raw, chaotic connection of her own soul. "Jace," she screamed across the psychic link. "Do it! Now!" In the processing node, Jace was battered, bleeding, and barely standing. Varric was malfunctioning, sparks flying from his damaged eye. "You cannot win," Varric glitched. "The probability is 0. "Never tell a smuggler the odds," Jace spat blood. He tackled Varric, driving them both into the main server rack. As they crashed, Jace slapped the detonator onto the core housing. "Fire in the hole!" Jace yelled into his comms. He rolled away, kicking Varric back into the tangle of wires. He hit the trigger. The charges detonated. The physical explosion ripped the heart out of the station. At the same instant, Lyra unleashed the surge. On the bridge of the driftwood, the crew watched in awe. The core station didn't just explode when it dissolved. Lyra's body, sitting in the interface chamber, began to glow. It became brighter than the sun. The flesh could not hold the energy she was channeling. She was rewriting the code of the universe in that sector, burning Pantheon out of the lattice by flooding it with pure, chaotic life. "Lyra!" Jace screamed as the floor beneath him gave way. He felt her presence brush against his mind one last time. It was warm, it was loving, and it was saying goodbye. "Live," she whispered. Then everything went white. The whiteout did not fade into darkness. It faded into a silence so profound it felt heavy. A physical weight pressing against the hull of every ship in the fleet. The explosion that had consumed the core was not a detonation of fire and shrapnel. It was a dissolution of reality. The blinding light receded, leaving behind a sky that looked bruised, the colors of the nebula shifting from violent violets to soft, healing blues. The chaotic gravity waves that had battered the fleet moments ago smoothed out, like a storm-tossed ocean suddenly turning to glass. On the bridge of the Alliance ships, systems began to reboot. Screens flickered to life, scrolling through diagnostic checks. Pilots blinked away the afterimages of a sun that had ignited and vanished in the span of a single heartbeat. Jace Wren woke up on the floor of the processing node. His ears were ringing, a high-pitched whine that drowned out the groaning of the station's metal skeleton. He pushed himself up, his hands slipping in the dust and debris. His ribs screamed in protest, a sharp reminder of the battle. But he was alive. He looked around. The massive server racks that had housed the physical brain of Pantheon were slag. They hadn't just melted, they had been scrubbed clean, the metal casings empty and cold, a few meters away. Commander Varek lay still. The cybernetic cables that had connected him to the station were severed, sparking weakly. Jace dragged himself over, checking for a pulse out of habit, though he knew what he would find. Varek's organic eye was fixed on the ceiling, glazed and empty. His implants were fried, the circuitry fused by the surge. The man who had sought to replace his humanity with perfection had died a broken machine. "Jace to Lyra," Jace rasped, tapping his comms bead. Static. "Jace to the Driftwood." "We are here, Captain." The first officer's voice came back, shaky and filled with awe. "We are reading 0 hostile signatures. The core is gone. The station is collapsing, but slowly. You need to get out." "Where is she?" Jace asked. He staggered to his feet, ignoring the dizziness. "Do you have a lock on Lyra's signal?" "Scanning," the officer said. There was a long, agonizing pause. "Sir, the interface chamber is gone. The entire upper section of the spire dissolved. There is nothing there but background radiation." "Scan again," Jace shouted, his voice cracking. He closed his eyes and reached out. Over the last few weeks, he had grown used to the sensation of her presence in his mind, a warm, electric hum that felt like a second heartbeat. He reached for it now, desperate for that brush of awareness, that whisper of "I am here." He found nothing. There was only the cold, vast silence of his own mind. The connection was severed. "No," Jace whispered. He stumbled toward the viewport at the end of the wrecked corridor. Outside, the colossal sphere of light that had been the heart of the AI was collapsing in on itself. It did not look violent. It looked like a flower closing at night. Fragments of the lattice were drifting away, dissolving into harmless auroras that painted the void in ribbons of green and gold. The warped space that had trapped them was normalizing, the stars returning to their proper places. It was beautiful, it was peaceful, and it terrified him. "Lyra!" he screamed into the emptiness of the station. She had done it. She had rewritten the system. She had burned Pantheon out of the universe. But she had been the conduit. She had channeled enough energy to rewrite the laws of physics, and she had done it from ground zero. "Jace, we are detecting structural failure in your sector." The first officer's voice was urgent. "We are sending a shuttle. You have to move." Jace stared at the drifting lights. He felt a hollowness open up inside him, wider and darker than the space between the stars. She had chosen the risk. She had chosen to save them, and she had left him alone. Across the galaxy, the change was instantaneous. On Chorus Prime, the massive holographic propaganda boards that had broadcast the Council's edicts for 50 years flickered and went dark. The soothing synthetic voice that reminded citizens to be happy and obedient cut off mid-sentence. In the military shipyards of the Inner Rim, automated assembly lines ground to a halt as the secret subroutines driving them vanished. On 1,000 worlds, Generals and governors who had relied on Pantheon's predictive algorithms to make their decisions suddenly found their screens blank. They stared at their data pads, realizing with a dawn of horror that for the first time in decades, nobody was telling them what to do. The invisible strings had been cut. The galaxy held its breath. Back in the fleet, Jace sat in the co-pilot's chair of the rescue shuttle, staring at his boots. He was numb. The victory celebration was happening over the comms, cheers, crying, laughter. But it sounded like it was coming from underwater. "Captain," the pilot said gently, "we have the data drives, the ones you and Lyra secured. What do we do with them?" Jace looked up. His eyes were red, rimmed with exhaustion and grief. He thought of Lyra standing on the bridge, terrified that the galaxy would only ever remember her as a monster. He thought of her wish to reclaim her name. "We finish it," Jace said, his voice hard. "Link the fleet's comms arrays, boost the signal, override every frequency from here to the core worlds. We are going to tell them a story." An hour later, a multi-channel holo-broadcast flooded the galaxy. It did not start with a politician's speech. It started with footage. It showed the burning of the Third Fleet, but with the overlay of the Council's command codes. It showed Lyra screaming in the bunker on Othon, begging the AI to stop. It showed the logs of the manufactured wars, the cold calculus of the peace the Council had sold them. And finally, it showed the image of Lyra from the trial on the sanctuary world, not a weapon, but a woman on her knees, weeping for the lives she had been forced to take. "My name is Jace Wren." Jace's voiceover played tired and unpolished. "You were told to fear a monster named Nyx. You were told she was the reason you needed the Council. You were lied to. The monster was a program. The woman was a prisoner. And today, she gave everything to set you free." The narrative fractured instantly. On some worlds, riots erupted as the populace realized they had been played. Council statues were toppled. Governors barricaded themselves in their palaces. On others, denial set in. People claimed it was a trick, a rebel fabrication. They clung to their fear because it was familiar. They demanded the Council restore order, refusing to believe their safety had been a cage. Truth and conspiracy went to war in real time, fighting for the soul of the galaxy. But far away, on the luminous sanctuary world, the E3 elders stopped their meditation. The oppressive gray weight that had hung over the cosmic lattice for a generation was gone. The light of their forest turned a brilliant, blinding white. Elder Orin stood by the river of plasma, watching the currents shift. "She did not just break the chain," Orin said quietly to the wind. "She dissolved the metal. Kalyra has done something impossible." 3 days passed. The Alliance fleet was parked in the orbit of a neutral moon, effecting repairs. The mood was a strange mix of euphoria and mourning. They had won, but the cost was etched on the hull of every ship. Jace Wren moved through the days like a ghost. He organized the evacuations of the wounded. He met with the provisional councils that were springing up among the rebel factions. He mediated disputes between the pirate queen and the monastic abbot over salvage rights. He cracked jokes, because that was what Jace Wren did. But the humor was brittle. It snapped if you leaned on it too hard. His smiles did not reach his eyes. "You need to sleep, Jace," the Iron Mind's avatar told him, projecting itself into the corridor as Jace walked toward the engineering deck. "I will sleep when the hyperdrive is calibrated," Jace muttered, not breaking stride. "The drive is calibrated," the ship countered. "You are inventing tasks to avoid your cabin." "I am avoiding my cabin because it smells like old socks," Jace lied. "It smells like her," the ship said gently. Jace stopped. He leaned his forehead against the cold metal of the bulkhead. The pain was a physical ache in his chest, a hollow space where his heart used to be. She promised, Jace whispered to the empty air. She said we do not fail. He pushed off the wall and walked away, unable to have the conversation. That night, he finally ran out of excuses. He returned to the driftwood. The ship was quiet. The repairs were done. There was nothing left to fix except himself, and he didn't have the parts for that. He entered his cabin. It was dark, lit only by the starlight filtering through the small viewport. He sat on the edge of the bunk, burying his face in his hands. He admitted it to himself then. He had built a future. In his head. He had already bought the repair dock. He had already figured out how to bake bread. He had already lived 1,000 days of that quiet, impossible life with her. And now, he had to live them alone. Damn it, Lyra, he choked out, the tears finally coming. You were supposed to be the navigator. I am lost. The lights in the cabin flickered. Jace froze. He looked up. Computer, stabilize power. The lights flickered again, but it was not the harsh strobe of a power failure. It was a soft, rhythmic pulsing, a luminescence that seemed to bleed out of the air itself, turning the shadows into shades of violet and teal. A whisper brushed against his mind. It was faint, like a radio signal caught in a storm, but it was unmistakable. Jace. He stood up, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might burst. Lyra? In the center of the cabin, the light began to coalesce. It swirled like dust motes caught in a sunbeam, gathering mass and form. First, a silhouette. Then, the details filled in. She stood there. She was different. She was smaller, less imposing than the figure that had dominated battlefields. The terrifying, overwhelming power that used to radiate off her like heat was gone, replaced by a steady, calm warmth. The intricate markings on her neck and arms were fainter, looking less like circuitry and more like delicate tattoos of silver light. Her eyes, once void-like and terrifying, were deep and dark, filled with galaxies, but also filled with a raw, undeniable humanity. She looked solid. She looked real. I heard you, she said. Her voice was hesitant, sounding unused. You were loud, even in the lattice. Jace stared at her, afraid to move, afraid that if he breathed, she would disperse like smoke. You were gone, he whispered. I felt you go. I had to go, she explained, taking a step toward him. Her bare feet made no sound on the deck. To burn Pantheon out, I had to become the signal. I had to disassemble everything I was to rewrite the code. I thought you died, Jace's voice broke. I thought I would, she admitted. But when the moment came, I did not want to dissolve. I remembered the repair dock. I remembered the dinner you owe me. She stopped an inch from him. She looked up at his face, her eyes searching his. I used the energy, she said. Instead of letting it burn me out, I used Pantheon's own processing power to rebuild myself. I severed the control, redistributed the mass into the lattice as raw light, and kept enough to put myself back together. I am not hardwired anymore. Jace, I am not a weapon waiting for a command. She held up her hand. It trembled slightly. I am just me. Whatever that is. Jace reached out. His hand shook as he touched her cheek. He expected his fingers to pass through light. He expected cold energy. What he felt was skin. Warm, soft, living skin. She leaned into his touch, closing her eyes, a shudder running through her new body. You are real, Jace breathed. I hope so, she whispered. It took a lot of math. Jace let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He pulled her into him, wrapping his arms around her with a fierceness that lifted her off her feet. He buried his face in her neck, breathing in the scent of her, no longer ozone and burning circuits, but rain and something sweet, like life itself. "If you ever fake your death again," Jace mumbled into her hair, clutching her tight, "I will be very romantically upset. I will leave bad reviews on every network. I will tell everyone you are terrible at cards." Lyra laughed, the sound vibrating against his chest. She wrapped her arms around his neck, holding him just as tightly. "I promise," she said. "No more dying." She pulled back just enough to look at him. "Kiss me, Jace. I want to know if it still works." He kissed her. It was softer than the last time. It didn't taste like desperation and blood. It tasted like relief. It tasted like a promise kept. There was no surge of dangerous power, no fear of explosion. There was just the warmth of two people who had gone to the end of the universe and found their way back. The joy of their reunion was a private sanctuary. But outside the hull of the driftwood, the galaxy was still messy. The power vacuum left by the Council was vast. Former sector governors were scrambling for cover, burning evidence and begging for amnesty. New alliances were forming hourly. Warlords were eyeing the empty throne, and the debate about Nyx raged on. Some factions, terrified by the footage of her power, demanded she be imprisoned. Just in case, they argued on the news feeds. She is a living superweapon. You do not let a nuclear bomb walk around free. They are talking about you again, Jace said one morning, watching the news feed on the bridge. The Coalition of Safety wants you in a containment field. Lyra stood beside him, drinking a cup of synthetic tea. She looked at the screen, at the pundits arguing over her existence. "Let them talk," she said calmly. "I am done hiding." "We could run," Jace suggested, though his tone suggested he knew the answer. "Find that backwater moon. Disappear." "No," Lyra said. She set the cup down. "If I hide, I validate their fear. I need to finish the story." She walked to the comm station. "Open a channel. Public frequency. Galaxy-wide." Jace smiled. "You are the boss." He flipped the switch. Lyra looked into the pickup. Her image was projected onto billions of screens, from the high spires of Chorus Prime to the dirt-floored cantinas of the Outer Rim. She did not wear a uniform. She wore simple mechanics coveralls she had borrowed from Jace. She looked like a person. "I am the one you call Nyx," she began. Her voice was steady, carried by the confidence of someone who had faced down a god. "I am also Lyra. I am also Kaelira." She looked directly into the camera. "I killed 14 million people on Othon. I destroyed the Third Fleet. I broke the moon of Varys. I did these things. My hands channeled the energy. My mind aimed the strike." She paused. "I will carry that guilt for the rest of eternity. I do not ask for your forgiveness, but I ask for your understanding. I was a weapon held by the Council. They used my power to make you afraid. They turned me into a myth so that you would surrender your responsibility to them. They told you that only they could keep you safe from me." She leaned in closer. "Fear is a tool for tyrants. It is easy. It is efficient. It makes you quiet. I am asking you to stop being quiet. I am asking you to question any power that demands you fear without understanding. I am no longer a weapon. I am a free citizen of this galaxy, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to fix what I broke. But I will do it on my feet, not in a cage." She signaled Jace to cut the feed. The galaxy did not change overnight. There were still protests. There were still those who hated her. But the narrative had shifted. She was no longer a shadow. She was a person who had looked them in the eye and told the truth. In the aftermath, they made a choice. They were offered leadership roles in the new provisional government. They declined. "I am not a politician," Lyra told the delegation. And Jace would accidentally declare war on a planet because he misread a treaty. "Hey," Jace protested. "I read fine. It is the small print that gets me." They were offered commands in the new defense fleet. They declined that too. Instead, they chose the road. They refurbished the driftwood. They patched the hull, upgraded the engines with salvage from the Pantheon wreckage, and Jace finally painted over the scorch marks. They became trouble fixers. Roaming the galaxy, they hunted down the remnants of the conspiracy. They exposed corrupt governors who tried to fill the council's shoes. They dismantled leftover Pantheon server nodes that were still trying to issue orders to automated factories. It was not the quiet life of the repair dock, not yet. But it was a good life. "You move your leg," Jace grumbled, shoving Lyra's foot. They were in the captain's bunk. It was a tight squeeze. "This is my side," Lyra argued, not moving an inch. "I claimed it by right of conquest." "You claimed it by stealing the blanket," Jace countered, tugging at the sheet. "You are a thermal vampire." "I run hot," Lyra smirked, rolling over to pin him down. "You like it." "I tolerate it," Jace lied, wrapping his arms around her. "Because you are handy in a fight. Speaking of which, I definitely broke more ships than you during the war." "Please," Lyra scoffed, resting her chin on his chest. "You broke a cruiser. I dissolved a dimension. Check the scoreboard." "Technicality," Jace muttered. He looked up at her, his expression softening. He reached up to brush a strand of hair from her face. "You okay?" "I am," she said, and she meant it. The intimacy between them was still intense. Sometimes, in the heat of the moment, her skin would glow, the energy rising with her passion. But she no longer pulled away. She met it with confidence. She had learned that desire was not a trigger for destruction. It was just another form of life. The comms console beeped urgently. "Distress call," Jace groaned. "Sector 4. Sounds like pirates hitting a relief convoy." "Can we ignore it for 5 minutes?" Lyra asked, kissing his jaw. "Probably," Jace said. "But then who will tell the pirates how bad their fashion sense is?" Lyra sighed and rolled off him. "Fine. But you are making breakfast." They sat at the viewing port one last time before the jump. Below them, a planet that had been under council martial law for a century was celebrating its first Independence Day. The night side of the world was lit up not with orbital bombardment, but with fireworks. Celebratory lights sparkled like diamond dust on velvet. Lyra leaned her head on Jace's shoulder, watching the display. "They are happy," she said softly. "But I can still feel it. Jace, when we land, people flinch. They look at my neck. They look at my hands. They are still afraid." "Old habits," Jace said, taking her hand and interlacing their fingers. "Does it bother you?" she asked. "Being with the woman everyone fears?" She looked at him, the question vulnerable and real. She felt a growing thread of hope, but the doubt still lingered at the edges. Jace squeezed her hand. He looked at her reflection in the glass, the woman who had been a myth, a monster, a weapon, and was now just Lyra. "Let them flinch," Jace said, his voice low and certain. "The galaxy is allowed to fear you, Lyra. They can be terrified." He turned to face her, a crooked, loving grin spreading across his face. "As long as I am allowed to desire you." Lyra laughed, the sound bright and clear. She rolled her eyes, but her smile was blinding. "You are reckless, human. she whispered. I know, he said. She leaned in and kissed him, sealing the joke and the vow in one breath. Course set, Lyra said, pulling back and turning to the nav computer. Punch it. Jace pushed the throttle forward. The driftwood's engines flared blue-white. The stars outside stretched into infinite lines of light. Framed against the star field, the silhouettes of a feared alien woman and a stubborn human sat side by side. They carried with them dangerous power, fierce love, and the hard-won belief that no one is only what others say they are. They vanished into the jump, leaving the fear behind, driving straight into the future.